Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Jennifer Brown. Jennifer Brown was born in 1979, radiated positivity and warmth, impacting those around her. Her numerous pursuits often left friends and family wondering how she managed it all, but her true passion was being a mother. Despite having to care for Noah, her son, this has not negatively affected her life. Instead, make Jennifer stronger, especially after Noah was diagnosed with autism as a child. As she cared for Noah, Jennifer became his rock and closest friend. They spent countless hours together, sharing joyful moments and supporting each other through life's challenges. Their heartwarming bond evoked feelings of tenderness and admiration from those who knew them. The small town adored this family for their genuine kindness and cheerful nature. Tragedy struck unexpectedly on January 3, 2023, when Jennifer vanished without leaving behind any clues. On January 4, 2023, Antonio Blair Watts Richardson contacted the Limerick Township Police Department, deeply concerned about his close friend Jennifer's disappearance. Although it had been less than 24 hours since he last saw or heard from her, Antonio's anxiety was growing by the minute. Despite numerous attempts, he couldn't reach Jennifer, which was unusual since she was always responsive, especially when it came to her son Noah. Jennifer's family and friends knew her as a devoted mother and caring person, making her sudden disappearance alarming. Antonio's call to the police initiated a lengthy and mysterious investigation. A massive search effort began, involving police officers, family, and friends, all hoping to find clues about Jennifer's disappearance. The main question on everyone's mind was what could have caused Jennifer to leave her son without explanation. At 4 p.m., Officer Stephen Crawford from the Limerick Township Police Department visited the Brown family home to check on the situation. He observed Jennifer's vehicle parked near the porch. Upon entering the house, he found her keys, purse, tablet, and work cell phone still inside. However, Jennifer's personal cell phone was nowhere to be found. When police attempted to track the phone, they discovered it had been turned off at 7 a.m. on January 4th and the signal couldn't be traced after that. The last known location of the phone was near the intersection of Lewis Road and Ridge Pike in Limerick. This discovery marked the first significant lead in the investigation and indicated that something ominous had occurred. As a result, Jennifer was officially reported missing, and the police launched an investigation. Investigators questioned Jennifer's family, friends, and neighbors, but none of them had any information about her disappearance. Her loved ones, including her Aunt Diane Brem and Jennifer's friends Tiffany Barron and Antonio, were adamant that Jennifer would never leave her son behind. As a devoted mother, she would never abandon her child. Despite efforts, no leads were found in Jennifer's disappearance. Her family appealed to the public and a reward was offered for information, but yielded nothing, leaving unanswered questions and growing anxiety. The police investigation started by examining the events of that day, focusing on Jennifer's close friend Antonio, who was the last person to see her alive. On what seemed like an ordinary January day, Jennifer and Antonio spent time in the living room discussing life, future plans, and their children. As their kids often played together, Jennifer asked Antonio to pick up her son Noah from school. Antonio agreed and headed to the school to get Noah. The next day, however, Noah's behavior at school raised concerns among his teachers. They noticed that he had missed 2 doses of his medication, which was unusual given Jennifer's diligent care for her son's condition. She always kept his teachers informed about his health and any issues that arose at school. The school staff became concerned when they couldn't reach Jennifer. Noah told them Jennifer had gone to the grocery store but hadn't returned. She would never leave her son alone at this time. Antonio also tried to contact her but was unsuccessful. Antonio reported her missing to the police. As the investigation continued, no new information about Jennifer's whereabouts emerged. hope for her return began to fade with each passing day. It seemed she had vanished without a trace and might never be found. However, on January 18th, 2 weeks after her disappearance was reported, 2 warehouse employees in nearby Limmer Township stumbled upon something unusual. They exited the building to grab coffee and stumbled upon what seemed to be a freshly dug hole. Upon closer inspection, they were shocked to find a woman's body buried in a shallow grave. The workers immediately notified the police, who promptly arrived at the scene. The body was identified as Jennifer Brown, who had been missing for 2 weeks. The sheriff informed Jennifer's family that her body had been found partially buried near a warehouse in Rosefor. An autopsy revealed that Jennifer's death was caused by asphyxiation, with 3 broken ribs indicating a violent struggle with her killer. The investigation shifted from a missing person case to a murder case. Police re-interviewed Jennifer's family and friends, but these conversations yielded no new leads. The investigation seemed to be reaching a dead end, with no suspects in sight. However, just when detectives thought they had hit a roadblock, an unexpected lead emerged from an unforeseen source. After Jennifer's disappearance and murder were made public, the police asked anyone with relevant information to come forward. Noah's teacher responded to this request. She remembered an incident that initially seemed insignificant but raised serious concerns after Jennifer's death. The teacher reported that Noah shared an important detail about the day Jennifer disappeared. Noah told his teacher that when Antonio picked him up from the bus stop on January 3rd, he saw his mom's personal cell phone among Antonio's belongings. Noah recognized the phone because the lock screen showed his own childhood photo. This information proved crucial in the investigation into Jennifer's murder. Previously, investigators suspected that Jennifer's killer had taken her phone. Now, Antonio became the main suspect. The police started investigating the relationship between Jennifer and Antonio, uncovering surprising details. Initially, Jennifer and Antonio's friendship appeared strong and enduring. They spent a significant amount of time together, were well acquainted, and their families socialized with one another. However, once the financial dealings between them became known, one that had been concealed behind their seemingly friendly relationship. Antonio owned a restaurant called Bird's Kitchen, which had declined and closed in early 2022. Following this, Antonio sought help from Jennifer in August 2022. To support her friend, Jennifer decided to invest in Antonio's business, helping him reopen Bird's Kitchen in a new location. They signed a contract that required Jennifer to provide regular financial support to sustain the restaurant, making payments approximately every 6 weeks. To rebuild Bird's Kitchen, Jennifer gave Antonio approximately $36,000 from August to January. They agreed she would give him another $99,000. Antonio was supposed to find a new location, pay rent, sign a contract, and reopen the restaurant in January 2023. However, Antonio spent the money on personal needs instead of the business. As a result, the property owners canceled their agreement with him on December 26, 2022, because he failed to meet his financial obligations. This left Antonio in a difficult situation, losing both money and the opportunity to open the restaurant. The police suspected Antonio of committing a crime to save his business due to his desperate situation. Upon investigating Jennifer's iPad, they found 2 unauthorized transfers of $177,000 to Bird's Kitchen on January 3rd. These transfers were not part of the agreement between Jennifer and Antonio, and they initially failed due to 2-factor authentication, which was later disabled. This evidence increasingly implicated Antonio in her murder. Police interviewed the owners of the property where Antonio lived, who had recently terminated his lease. Surprisingly, on January 4th, the same day Antonio reported Jennifer missing, he had met with them, claiming he had the money to sign a new lease. This led investigators to believe that Antonio was likely the killer, but they knew he would not confess easily. They needed concrete evidence to prove his guilt. To gather more information, investigators spoke with Antonio's wife, Tiara Taylor. They asked her about Antonio's whereabouts on the day Jennifer went missing. Tiara told them that Antonio had visited the Brown family at around 1 p.m. on January 3rd and didn't return home until 4:30 a.m. the next morning, when he picked up Noah from the bus stop. She also mentioned that Antonio came home briefly, then left again around 5 p.m. and didn't return until late that night. This timeline became a crucial focus point for further investigation. Further investigation found that Antonio spent the night with his mistress, Tatiana Garrett, and didn't meet her until 8 p.m. This left a 3-hour gap with no alibi. Based on evidence, detectives created a timeline of the murder. According to them, Antonio went to Jennifer's house on January 3rd around 1 p.m. and allegedly killed her while Noah was at school. Antonio then transferred funds from Jennifer's iPad to his account and left to pick up Noah from the bus stop around 4 p.m. Later, he returned to Jennifer's house, dropped off Noah, and went back to dispose of the body. He buried it in a shallow grave in a field near Roseford. Afterwards, he went to Tatiana's house and spent the night. Everything seemed carefully planned, but one mistake led the police to Antonio. The mistake was letting Noah see his mother's cell phone. The police had enough evidence to convict him but investigated further to confirm his guilt. This involved film experts and a trained dog that could detect cadaveric odors indoors. First, the dog was taken to Jennifer's home to familiarize itself with her scent. This was the same location where the crime had occurred, in her kitchen. The police then led the dog to Antonio's car, where it immediately picked up the same scent. This final piece of evidence solidified the detective's suspicions of Antonio's involvement in the murder. After months of investigation, Antonio was arrested on February 8th and charged with first-degree murder, third-degree murder, and theft. He is currently being held at the Montgomery County Correctional Facility without bail, awaiting a preliminary hearing where he will face the law for his alleged crimes. Jennifer's loved ones were devastated by her death, especially since the killer was someone they trusted. Now that the killer has been brought to justice, the case was finally closed. The boy's observation of the killer's mistake played a crucial role in uncovering the truth and bringing the perpetrator to justice. The tragic events in Limer Township serve as a reminder that even the most meticulously planned crimes will ultimately be solved. Cruel and inhumane acts will not go unpunished, and those responsible will face the law. Hello friends. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Jessica Chambers. Jessica Lane Chambers was a 19-year-old woman from Cortland who had a complex and challenging upbringing. She lived with her mother near her grandmother's house, while her father and stepmother resided down the street. Despite her petite frame, Jessica had a strong and determined personality. Her family life was marked by turmoil and instability. Her father had a history of run-ins with the law, including a conviction for manufacturing methamphetamines and a DUI arrest in the early 2000s. This tumultuous environment was not unique to Jessica's family. Many of her friends and neighbors also experienced similar struggles. Tragedy struck Jessica's life at a young age. In 2006, a neighbor was shot multiple times in his yard. Jessica's own life was also marked by difficulties. She struggled with her parents, had rocky relationships with boyfriends who had trouble with the law, and occasionally engaged in violent outbursts during arguments. These behaviors intensified when she was 17, following the death of her older brother, Alan, in a car accident in 2012. After her mother disapproved of her new boyfriend, Jessica moved out of the family home for several months. Jessica's life was marked by challenges from a young age. Her father had served time in prison, but by 2014, he had turned his life around and was working as a mechanic for the local sheriff's department. Despite her own brushes with the law, including selling illicit substances and associating with local gangs, Jessica was a well-liked and respected member of her community. Her warm smile and friendly demeanor made her death all the more shocking and mysterious. When a car fire broke out in her hometown, rumors quickly spread that Jessica was involved. Her father, due to his connection to the sheriff's department, was immediately informed about the incident. He quickly relayed the news to his wife, who rushed to tell Jessica's mother. They women arrived at the hospital while Jessica was still alive. The investigation into the fire that killed Jessica initially focused on the possibility of a car accident. However, this theory was quickly dismissed due to the lack of evidence, such as skid marks or damage to the vehicle. The burned car showed no signs of impact or damage, which further ruled out the accident theory. The primary theory shifted to arson. However, the police had limited leads and insufficient evidence, which hindered the investigation. To gather more information, investigators interviewed numerous individuals who had contact with Jessica in the days leading up to her death. The list of potential suspects included Jessica's boyfriend, who was in prison at the time of the arson. However, this theory was eventually dismissed due to his alibi, as he had been living in Iowa since their breakup. Ali Alai, the owner of a local gas station, also came under suspicion, as he was one of the last people to see Jessica alive. After providing a statement, Ali was released. Another theory suggested that Jessica's association with a local gang may have led to her death. However, the gang members denied any involvement and expressed their condolences to the Chambers family. Many of the individuals questioned during the investigation had motives to lie, even if they were not directly involved in Jessica's death. The investigation appeared to be at a standstill, with no clear suspect or motive for the brutal act. Jessica's last week of life was meticulously reconstructed by investigators. It was discovered that on December 5, 2014, she drove to the M&M Minimart after receiving a phone call. There, she purchased $14 worth of gasoline and departed at 5:15 p.m. Half an hour later, at 5:45 p.m., Jessica called her mother, saying she would be home soon. At that time, she was wearing camouflage pajama pants and had her hair pulled back in a bun. Jessica made several more stops. These included visiting an unknown house and driving to a nearby town. Surveillance footage captured a man wearing a striped shirt filling a gas can with fuel. Although it's unclear where he went afterward, he did seem to be heading in the same direction as Jessica. According to her phone records, she spent 10 to 15 minutes stopped at a traffic light on Highway 2, headed toward Batesville. However, there is a significant gap in the timeline, from 6:30 p.m. to 7:32 p.m., often referred to as the mystery hour. Further investigation eventually shed some light on these missing minutes. It's believed that during this time, Jessica continued driving to her eventual destination. Her phone's GPS confirmed that at 7:30 p.m., she reached Heron Road. Unfortunately, it was on this very spot that her car would be discovered on fire. The investigation into Jessica Chambers' disappearance and death progressed slowly until December 2015, when 17 suspected gang members were arrested on unrelated charges. During plea negotiations, the gang members identified Quentin Tellis as someone who was with Jessica just an hour before the fire, after being offered a chance to cooperate with the investigation. The investigation focused on Quentin Tellis after reviewing Jessica's social media and cell phone activity. Tellis initially claimed he only met Jessica once, but after further questioning and presenting all their messages, he was arrested and charged with Jessica's murder through arson. Text messages show Tellis sent Jessica intimate requests on the day of the tragedy. At 9:02 a.m., Jessica texted Quentin, and he replied. Tellis texted, "I'm ready," at 10:09 a.m. and was picked up by Jessica shortly after. They picked up a friend at 10:49 a.m. and dropped Quentin off at 2:03 p.m. Tellis messaged Jessica again, asking for intimacy, his fourth such request in 4 days. Recovered deleted texts included, "I'm excited," and "Come lie with me," which Jessica ignored. The passenger seat in Jessica's burned car was pushed back, suggesting intimacy. Prosecutors argued this was evidence of their activities that evening. Tellis was charged with Jessica's murder and arson on February 24th. The investigation took time to build a case. The first trial began in 2017 in Batesville, Mississippi, with strict security measures in place. Prosecutor John Champion warned jurors of disturbing images of burned victim Jessica Chambers and 35 witnesses. Jessica met Quentin Tellis, 7 years her senior, around Thanksgiving 2014. FBI agent Dustin Blunt testified that Tellis met Jessica at a gas station through a friend and they spent intimate time together. Quentin Tellis had sent Jessica Chambers text messages requesting intimacy, even on the day of her death. The front seat of her burned car was adjusted downward, as Tellis had described. Tellis attempted to strangle Chambers, then set her on fire. Tellis confessed to investigators that he saw Chambers that night and they went to a fast food restaurant together. However, his alibi couldn't be confirmed, and he was seen on a store surveillance camera purchasing a phone card. Tellis didn't testify in his own defense. Prosecutors pointed to text messages where Tellis repeatedly requested intimacy from Chambers, who consistently denied him. FBI agent Dustin Blunt shared that Tellis deleted Chambers' contact information and text messages from his phone after her death. Tellis claimed he did this because he didn't want Chambers' number in his phone. Tellis and Chambers met through a friend at a gas station, and they had been intimate at some point. Tellis' DNA was found on Chambers' keys, and his cell phone records placed him at the location on the night of the fire. Despite this, Tellis maintained his innocence. Defense attorney Darla Palmer urged jurors to disregard the cell phone location evidence, arguing it couldn't prove Tellis and Chambers were at the same place. Tellis' family claims the police are looking for someone to blame in a highly charged racial issue. The first trial ended in a mistrial due to confusion over jury instructions. By the time of the retrial in 2018, Quentin Tellis was under investigation in Louisiana for the end of life of student Ming Chin Xia, as well as for the illegal use of a stolen bank card. In May 2019, he was charged with second-degree murder in connection with Xia's demise. The second trial was notably challenging. Jurors were shown a photo of Jessica Chambers, which firefighter Cole had taken upon arriving at the scene. Cole was deeply disturbed by the image of Chambers, whose lips were severely burned and blackened with soot. Cole told the jurors that the photo Cole took of Chambers was etched in her memory, and she saw it every morning and every night. A veteran firefighter also testified that he had never seen a victim with such severe burns. When he found Chambers, she was lying on the ground, struggling to speak, and was sitting on a blanket. Her hair was singed, and her nose and mouth were surrounded by blisters that covered her entire body. Testimonies at the second hearing also included a woman named Sherry Flowers, who had not appeared at the first trial of Tellis but told investigators during questioning that she had picked up a hitchhiker on the night Jessica Chambers was tragically ended. Sherry Flowers did not recognize Tellis in court and agreed with the prosecutor that she did not know whom she had picked up. However, she told the court that a man flagged her down, and she stopped because she thought it was her cousin. She agreed to give a ride to the man, whom she described as an African-American male, about 20 years old, and of slim to medium build. Tellis, who was 5 feet and 9 inches tall, was 26 at the time. Initially, Flowers did not reach out to investigators, and when asked why in court, she said, "I couldn't remember," and thought it wasn't relevant to the case. Nevertheless, the prosecutors attempted to link this ride to the demise of Jessica Chambers, suggesting it provided Quentin Tellis with the opportunity to leave Jessica's car in order to return and set it on fire. However, the defense contested the timing, and Flowers admitted that she was unsure of the exact time of the ride. the investigator presented evidence that Jessica Chambers's keys were found in a ditch 2 days after her death, near the location where Tellis was picked up. However, the defense argued that it was impossible to prove where the keys had been at the time of the crime, and therefore, they should not be admitted as evidence. Despite the emotional testimony, the second jury was unable to reach a verdict in 2018, just like the first jury 2 years earlier. As a result, Quentin Tellis was not convicted of setting Jessica Chambers and her car on fire, and the case remains unsolved. However, many people continue to investigate the case online, searching for clues that may have been missed and developing their own theories about who was responsible for Jessica Chambers' death. The Jessica Chambers case began to garner widespread attention immediately after her death, but as the media's interest declined, internet sleuths around the world picked up the case. To this day, the mystery surrounding her final hours remains one of the most disturbing aspects of the case. On the night of the crime, Jessica left her house at 5 p.m. and told her mother she was heading to a nearby gas station. Security footage shows Jessica stopping at the gas station twice. During one of those visits, she pumped gas and then went towards the store, where she waved at someone off camera. Despite efforts to identify the person Jessica was waving at, the mystery remains unsolved. Although Quentin Tellis, 29, has been identified as the prime suspect, he is still incarcerated for a different crime. Consequently, justice for Jessica has yet to be achieved. Tragically, Lisa, Jessica's mother, passed away on October 29, 2021, at the age of 52, without seeing her daughter's case reach a conclusive outcome. Friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Sarah Stern. Sarah Elizabeth Stern was born on March 24, 1997, in Neptune City, New Jersey, to Michael and Susan Stern. As their only child, Sarah received all their love and attention due to her mother's health issues, which made it impossible for her to have more children. Sarah grew up to be an outgoing, cheerful, and energetic kid. She was actively involved in school theater, photography, drawing, and sports, competing in swimming and softball. Her dream was to become an artist or designer, and she planned to attend a local college for arts. Tragedy struck in 2013 when Sarah's mother, Susan, passed away after a long battle with cancer. This devastating loss sent Sarah into depression, but she tried to support her grieving father, Michael, with whom she lived. They found comfort in their dog, Buddy, whom Sarah adored. Sarah's life was finally taking a turn for the better. After graduating from college, she planned to apply to a prestigious university in New York. Before that, she had always dreamed of traveling the world, with Canada being her top destination. She even considered living there for a while. Meanwhile, Michael Stern frequently traveled out of state for work, sometimes for weeks at a time. But he never worried about leaving his daughter Sarah alone at home because she was a responsible and independent young adult. And their town was known for being quiet and safe. However, during one of Michael's business trips in December 2016, trouble arose. On the night of December 3rd, around 2:30 a.m., a taxi driver called the police station to report an abandoned car on the Belmar Bridge along Highway 35. The area was deserted and rarely visited at night, making the empty vehicle immediately suspicious. The taxi driver, who was taking a shortcut home over the old bridge, had stopped to check if anyone needed help when he saw the car parked by the side of the road. Finding the car empty and no one around, he called the police, suspecting that the driver might have abandoned their car to jump into the water below, a tragic but not uncommon occurrence at that spot. The police found an abandoned silver sedan on a bridge with the keys still in the ignition, but no signs of blood or struggle. They suspected that the owner might have gone there to commit suicide by jumping into the river. After checking the car's ownership, they found it belonged to 85-year-old Lily Stern, who lived in the same town. When the officers visited Lily, they found her alive and well. She told them that she hadn't driven for years due to poor eyesight, and that her 19-year-old granddaughter Sarah used the car. Lily tried to call Sarah, but her phone was turned off. Lily then gave the officers her son's address, where Sarah lived, and mentioned that her father was away on a work trip. When the police went to the house, they found the back door open, which was concerning. After searching the house, they didn't find anything suspicious, except for a locked-in dog whining in one of the bedrooms. The house was in order, with no signs of struggle, blood, or evidence of an intruder. However, Sarah was nowhere to be found. Michael Stern rushed home on the first available flight after learning about the situation. When he arrived, the homeowner informed him that nothing was out of place or missing, including all of Sarah's personal belongings, such as her passport, driver's license, and mobile phone, which she always carried with her. The police shared their initial theory with Michael, suggesting that Sarah might have gone to the bridge intending to jump, and asked if he had noticed any signs of suicidal thoughts or self-harm attempts. Michael admitted that Sarah had struggled with depression after her mother's passing, but with support from family, friends, and her studies, she had recovered. She had ambitious plans for her future, including becoming a designer and traveling the world. Despite this, on the night of December 3rd, Sarah disappeared from her home, and her car was found abandoned on the bridge just hours later. These were the known facts, and the investigation now needed to focus on identifying who Sarah had been in contact with that day, what conversations she had, and who was the last person to see her. After Sarah Stern's disappearance, early witnesses came forward to reveal that she had spent most of December 2nd with her childhood friend, Liam McAtasney. As the last person to see her, Liam had valuable information that could help solve the mysterious case. The police quickly decided to interview him to gather details and piece together what had happened that day. When the police arrived at Liam's house, they met his mother, who told them that her son was sleeping after working a night shift. At the officer's request, she woke Liam up, who seemed puzzled by the situation. Upon learning about Sarah's disappearance, Liam was shocked and confirmed that they had indeed spent the previous day together. He agreed to go to the police station to give a statement. Liam and Sarah attended college together and decided to skip their last 2 lectures on Friday morning. After classes, they went back to her place, where they spent the day playing video games, chatting, and discussing their future plans. They left her house twice, once to get food from a nearby fast food restaurant, and again to visit a local supermarket around 7 p.m. Liam then left Sarah's house to start his night shift at a 24-hour store and didn't see her again after that. When questioned about Sarah's mental state, Liam shared that she had been struggling with depression since her mother's death. She was torn between wanting to end her life or running away to start fresh. Liam also revealed that Sarah had difficulty communicating with her father and finding common ground with him. Although Liam didn't rule out the possibility that Sarah might have taken her own life, he mentioned that she had recently considered moving to Canada and had even exchanged some money for Canadian dollars. This was later confirmed when a small amount of Canadian currency was found in her bedside table drawer, although it wasn't enough to cover much. Preston Taylor, a close friend of Sarah's and her prom date, corroborated Liam's statement. He added that Sarah was struggling with depression and speculated that she might have either run away to Canada or jumped off the bridge. By the end of the conversation, Preston was overcome with emotion, expressing his deep affection for Sarah. The idea that Sarah had fled to Canada or elsewhere was quickly ruled out, as she didn't have her passport and couldn't have left the country. Investigators then focused on the possibility that Sarah might have jumped off the bridge, and a massive search effort was launched in the river. The strong current in the area complicated the search, as it could have carried a body far from the bridge. To aid in the search, divers were deployed, specialized equipment was used, and hundreds of volunteers, along with police, scoured the riverbanks for any signs of Sarah or her belongings. Liam and Preston were among the volunteers who actively helped search for Sarah. Unfortunately, the search efforts yielded nothing, and no sign of Sarah was found. As a result, the authorities decided to continue interviewing people who knew Sarah well, which led to the discovery of a strange inconsistency. Sarah's friends and classmates described her as being in great spirits, with none of them aware of any problems she had with her father. In fact, she often spoke about him in a warm and loving way. However, after she disappeared, her friends Liam and Preston seemingly took on the role of grieving relatives, garnering sympathy from many, but their behavior soon raised suspicions, as if they were acting for an audience. Despite only recently becoming close, the police decided to re-question Liam and Preston, noticing that their behavior was odd. During the re-questioning, Liam appeared deeply distressed when asked about his relationship with Sarah and Preston. Liam revealed that the three of them grew up together, attended the same school, and shared their deepest secrets and dreams. Preston had even taken Sarah to the prom, but their relationship was purely platonic. Liam considered Sarah like a sister, and they had even listed each other as siblings on social media. Sarah trusted him completely and had confided in him about the large sum of money her mother had left her, which was mostly stored in a safety deposit box. Sarah supposedly distrusted her father, who she thought wanted the money for himself, so she kept it in the bank with plans to withdraw it later to escape to Canada. However, Michael Stern disputed this story, providing a different account. According to Stern, his wife had been saving money for their daughter's future expenses, such as education, a wedding, or a home, since Sarah's birth. They stored the cash at home in a shoebox, which contained old and worn bills that didn't seem significant at the time. After his wife's passing, Stern gave the box of money to Sarah, advising her to deposit the old and worn bills into the bank. Sarah followed his advice, putting some of the money in her checking account for daily expenses and renting a safety deposit box for the rest. She intended to use the money to fund her university education and travel the world. Michael firmly denied any claim to the money for his own use. The discovery of the missing student's large sum of money led investigators to suspect that someone might have targeted her for financial gain. They decided to investigate her financial transactions, including her safety deposit box and bank records. The investigation revealed that Sarah had withdrawn a substantial amount of money from an ATM just a few days before she disappeared. She also visited her bank to withdraw cash from her safety deposit box. The detectives were surprised to find that Sarah was not alone during her bank visit. Bank surveillance footage showed that Liam accompanied her. This raised new questions, as Liam had failed to mention this visit during previous questioning. When asked about it, Liam hesitated before explaining that Sarah trusted only him and had asked for his accompaniment because she was afraid to carry a large amount of cash home alone. His explanation seemed reasonable, and his behavior appeared natural. A security camera at a house opposite the Stern residence captured footage of the street and neighboring yards. The footage showed that Liam stayed at Sarah's house until 7 p.m., then left for work and didn't return. The silver sedan was seen leaving the garage around 11 p.m. that night. About a month after Sarah's disappearance, an acquaintance named Anthony came to the police station with a disturbing story. Unaware of the events, Anthony had been out of town for several weeks. It turned out that Anthony had been classmates with Sarah, Liam, and Preston, and after graduation, pursued a passion for filmmaking, remaining in touch only with Liam, who shared his interest in cinema. About a month and a half before Sarah disappeared, Liam visited Anthony, and they spent an evening brainstorming ideas for a teenage horror movie. Liam came up with a plot where a girl tells a friend about a large sum of money she has, and the friend gains her trust before strangling her and dumping her body in a river. Anthony liked the idea, and they wrote a couple of pages of the script that night. Anthony later moved on to another project, forgot about the story, and left town to work as a camera assistant on a film shoot. When he returned, Liam unexpectedly called him, asking if the police had questioned him about anything. Anthony was surprised by the question and learned about Sarah's disappearance and the suspicious circumstances surrounding it. He decided to go to the police himself. The authorities instructed Anthony to have an open conversation with Liam and try to get him to confess. To do this, Anthony invited Liam to work on a project that required renting expensive camera equipment, knowing Liam's desire to be in a movie. Liam took the bait and suggested they meet in person to discuss the details. The police installed a hidden camera in Anthony's car and told him to carefully get Liam to confess when they met. When Liam got into the car, he looked around cautiously, then handed Anthony an envelope containing $2,000 in old bills, saying it was for the filming equipment. Anthony asked where Liam got the old money, and Liam hesitated before admitting that it belonged to Sarah, saying that he and Preston had taken it from her house because the dead don't need it. Although Liam didn't provide further details, his admission was enough evidence for the police to arrest him and Preston on suspicion of being accomplices. Preston agreed to cooperate with the authorities and made a deal with the prosecution. He admitted to helping his friend Liam cover up the evidence and dispose of Sarah's body, but claimed he did not participate in the murder itself. According to Preston, Liam had planned to steal Sarah's inheritance as soon as he found out about it. Sarah had kept the inheritance a secret, even from her best friend, but revealed it to Liam when she started planning a trip to Canada. Liam convinced her to withdraw the money from the bank and keep it in a home safe, and even borrowed a significant amount from her before the murder. When Sarah's father was away on a business trip, Liam put his plan into action. He promised Preston $25,000 to help him, but planned to do the actual killing himself. Liam convinced Sarah to withdraw the money, and then spent the day with her, waiting for the right moment to strike. He locked her dog in another room, approached Sarah from behind, and strangled her. The crime unfolding was more complicated than anticipated. Initially, Sarah, being athletic and strong, put up a fierce struggle until she lost consciousness. However, she would occasionally show signs of life, making it difficult for the perpetrator to be certain of her demise. It took around half an hour to confirm that Sarah had stopped breathing. After leaving Sarah's house, Liam went to work, at which point Preston entered the house through the back door, avoiding the camera's view. Preston dragged Sarah's body to the garage and cleaned up the room. A few hours later, Liam returned to Sarah's house, took a small safe from her room, and placed the body in the car. He drove away carefully to avoid being captured on the neighbor's camera. Liam met Preston at the bridge, where they disposed of the body in the river. They wiped down the steering wheel and drove back to Liam's house in Preston's car to divide the stolen money. However, they were disappointed to find only $110,000 in the safe, rather than the expected $100,000. Despite this, they decided not to spend the old bills immediately to avoid raising suspicion. Preston buried the safe in a local park, and they only used the money Sarah had withdrawn from her account. Despite confessing, Liam McAtasney denied involvement, trying to blame his friend instead. His lawyer claimed he was innocent, suggesting Taylor had acted alone. Since Sarah's body was never found and her disappearance was still unclear, there was a small chance she was still alive, having vanished without her belongings. However, a search of Liam's house found a key matching the buried safe. Identified by Preston, the trial lasted over 2 years, but despite the lack of a body and Liam's denials, his guilt was proven through evidence. The script written months before the incident, the key found in his home, his recorded words in Anthony's car, and the old bills he provided all contributed to the verdict. Furthermore, fingerprints of both Preston and Liam were found inside the safe, and a colleague testified that Liam was absent from work that night, asking to be covered. Liam McAtasney was sentenced to life in prison without parole. His accomplice, who did not directly participate in the crime, received an 18-year sentence for obstructing justice and hindering the investigation. Preston Taylor will be eligible for parole. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Jessica Bardwell. A team of detectives and FBI agents visited a remote ranch in Farmersville, North Texas, in the evening, and they immediately began searching the wooded area. They soon found a piece of metal covering something, and nearby there was an overwhelming smell of decay. Although the smell was unbearable, the officers were prepared for what they might find. When they removed the metal, they found a female body wrapped in a blue sheet, covered with a blanket, and 2 red and gold towels stained with blood. A pile of trash mixed with dirt served as a makeshift grave for the victim. It was clear that the perpetrator was inexperienced, as their attempts to hide the body only made it more noticeable. The condition of the body was terrible, having decomposed significantly under the scorching sun for a week. It took experts 7 days to officially identify the victim, and they did so by requesting dental records of the presumed victim. The investigation suggested that the discovered body belonged to 27-year-old Jessica Bardwell. The examination revealed that her death was the result of a crime, but the exact cause could not be determined due to the body's advanced decomposition. Notably, an anonymous informant provided crucial information that led to the discovery of the body, but their identity was not disclosed. Jessica Bardwell, a beloved daughter and friend, had seemingly vanished from the home she shared with her boyfriend, Jason Lowe. Her father, Gary, sensed trouble and set out from Mississippi to Texas to search for her, following his instincts that she was in danger. Let's start from the beginning. Gary had an exceptionally strong bond with his daughter Jessica. He recalled being deeply moved when she was born on September 10, 1988, in Pascagoula, Mississippi. Gary and Carla Bardwell were wonderful parents to Jessica and her older brother Brandon. The siblings got along well, with Brandon always protecting his little sister from bullies. Their grandmother, Kitty, who adored her grandchildren, would often visit and engage in fun activities with them, such as reading books, sharing life stories, and playing games. In short, they were a quintessential American family. Jessica was a happy and kind girl with a unique style. She dreamed of working in the beauty industry and opening her own salon. When she was 14, her parents got divorced, and she chose to live with her father, Gary, with whom she had a warm and trusting relationship. Gary, a firefighter, remarried Gina, who was an excellent homemaker and took good care of Jessica. As Jessica grew up, she wanted to be independent and moved to Orange Beach, Alabama, where she worked as a waitress at Cobalt Restaurant. She kept in touch with her father, who would visit her and take her boating and fishing. Jessica's friend and restaurant manager, Kimberly, admired the strong bond between Jessica and her father. At Cobalt, Jessica met Terry, and they started dating. However, she soon fell for Jason, a friend of Terry's, and left him for Jason. This new relationship turned her life around, and Jason promised to help her achieve her dreams. He got a job in Dallas, Texas, and Jessica followed him, without telling her father, afraid of disappointing him. In Dallas, Jessica searched for a new job and looked for a location for her salon. She and Jason planned to get married and buy a house. However, her relationship with her father suffered, and she stopped answering his calls. Gary was worried and eventually found out about Jason and Jessica's move. He tried to re-establish contact, but discovered that Jason controlled all communications. Months later, Jessica contacted her father, and he met Jason when they visited Pascagoula. Gary disliked Jason and tried to convince Jessica not to return to Texas, but she insisted on following her dreams. Despite Gary's concerns, Jessica seemed happy and didn't show any signs of distress. Gary's fatherly instincts kicked in after meeting his daughter's boyfriend, Jason, prompting him to write a song titled "Taken" for his daughter. Unfortunately, his concerns proved justified. 4 months after Jessica moved to Texas, she suddenly stopped responding to her family's calls. The final straw came on May 8th, when she failed to wish her mother and stepmother a happy Mother's Day, a gesture uncharacteristic of her. Gary sensed something was terribly wrong, especially since she missed a cherished family holiday. He immediately called Jason, who claimed he didn't know Jessica's whereabouts, citing their open relationship as the reason. However, Gary knew this was a lie, as Jason controlled every aspect of Jessica's life. The next morning, Gary drove to Texas, suspecting Jason's involvement in his daughter's disappearance. He messaged Jason, warning him that he would face consequences if Jessica wasn't home when he arrived. Upon reaching their apartment, Gary found no trace of Jessica or her belongings, but Jason continued to feign ignorance. Later, Kimberly shared disturbing details about Jessica's relationship with Jason. He had wasted money on drugs and entertainment, and his promises to help Jessica achieve her dreams had vanished. In private, Jason was rude and aggressive, leading to frequent conflicts with Jessica. With Jessica still missing, Gary filed a missing person report with the Richardson police. Detective Hiram Hall, a father of 3 daughters, led the investigation into her disappearance. The police spoke with Jason several times, inspecting the house, but found no trace of Jessica. Jason claimed he last saw Jessica on May 8th, leaving without explanation, possibly to visit her parents. However, investigators discovered that Jessica had actually sold her car 3 weeks earlier, a fact Jason knew about since he was present at the sale. This raised suspicions, prompting the police to interrogate him again on May 12th. During the investigation, police found cocaine in Jason's kitchen and a suspicious substance in his garage. The Audi car inside the garage had mud stains and a detached bumper. Although the car was empty, the police suspected Jessica might be inside. The smell of decomposition led them to examine the trunk, where they found blood stains. Jason claimed he got stuck in the mud while searching for Jessica, but he couldn't explain the blood in the car or the cocaine in his home. Given the circumstances, the case was reclassified as a homicide to prevent Jason from fleeing. Despite the lack of a body, the police charged Jason with homicide, and the search for Jessica continued. Eventually, her body was found, and the autopsy report revealed that she had been brutally discarded. A year later, Jason claimed the incident was an accident and hoped for the jury's understanding. However, the prosecution faced challenges in building their case, and the defense staged a mock trial that resulted in a not guilty verdict. After Jason revealed the location of Jessica's body, he received a shorter prison sentence, allowing her family to give her a dignified burial. Jessica's father, Gary, was consumed by grief and anger, seeking justice in a unique way. He took a photo of Jason, placed it on a stump, and hit it with a 12-pound sledgehammer, finding some small comfort in this form of emotional release. Gary struggled to cope with his loss, feeling guilty for not persuading Jessica to stay away from her controlling boyfriend, Jason. He had hoped she would break up with him, but she had chosen to give him another chance instead. During the trial, Gary replayed their last conversations in his mind, including a call from Jessica when she admitted he was right about Jason after an argument. Although she had briefly found shelter with a friend, she had returned to Jason the next day. Gary had reluctantly accepted her decision, a choice he would later regret deeply. When Mr. Bardwell arrived in Texas, he was determined to seek justice. During her opening statement, prosecutor Cynthia Walker described Jason as a complex person who few people wanted to associate with due to his history of substance abuse, which often triggered violent outbursts. It's possible that Jessica was a victim of one such episode. Prosecutor Wes Wynn called upon Jason's former girlfriends to testify. They corroborated the prosecution's claims, sharing their own fears of Jason's aggression, which was fueled by jealousy. Like Jessica, Jason had isolated them from their loved ones and exhibited manipulative and deceitful behavior. These traits ultimately led each of them to end their relationships with him, which required careful planning and caution. However, Jason was able to present himself as a superior individual to many people, deceiving them about his true nature. In response to the allegations, Jason revealed that he had started using drugs at the age of 13, influenced by his friends, which led to addiction. Despite his struggles, he managed to earn multiple degrees and secure a job with a well-known global company, demonstrating his determination to not let his addiction define him. Jason admitted to planning to fulfill Jessica's dream of building a family together, motivated by his love for her. However, the prosecution presented a different image of Jason, contradicting his claims. The investigation revealed that Jessica died between May 1st and May 3rd, likely on the day she argued with her neighbors, the Jordans, and was last seen alive. After the argument, Jason moved Jessica's body to the garage and placed it in the trunk of his car, where it stayed for several days. Forensic evidence confirmed that the blood found in the Audi belonged to Jessica. Jason then transported her body to a remote farm and hid it in the nearby woods. The sheet used to wrap the body was later found to be part of Jessica's bedding set, which Jason still had in his home, despite Jessica's death and her body decomposing in the car. After Jessica's death, the accused continued to see multiple women, and his phone contained evidence of this, including flirtatious messages and intimate photos that he had sent to them before meeting them at his apartment. Jason claimed that he was trying to distract himself from his emotional pain and guilty feelings by using substances, which he believed made dealing with reality easier. The investigation discovered Jason's presence at Jessica's time of death through a clever tactic. Because Jason had consistently denied any involvement, detectives asked Tommy Jordan, someone who knew Jason, to have a conversation with him while being monitored. During this conversation, Jason finally admitted to making a terrible mistake with Jessica, expressing guilt and remorse, although he only acknowledged culpability for criminal negligence. Jason's statement to the police was seen as a confession, and they realized they had caught him. Jason made a deal with the prosecution and revealed the location of Jessica's body. At the trial, he finally told his side of the story. According to Jason, he and Jessica had taken libido-enhancing pills that evening and got intimate in the shower. During the shower, Jason slipped and Jessica fell, hitting her head on the bathtub. She complained of feeling hot and dizzy and sat down. Jason claimed he offered to call an ambulance, but Jessica refused, saying she just needed to rest and sleep. However, the next morning, Jason found her lying on his chest, unconscious and not breathing. Despite his attempts to revive her, Jessica was dead. Scared of being accused of murder, Jason hesitated to call the police and decided to take matters into his own hands. He initially left the body in his car and later hid it on a remote farm, carelessly dumping her in a pile of trash without a proper burial. However, Jason's story was not believable due to his questionable character and the medical examination findings. The autopsy revealed that Jessica had suffered severe head injuries that couldn't have resulted from just falling in the shower, indicating that Jason had attempted to cover up evidence of physical abuse. As a result, his entire story was proven to be a fabrication. After 6 hours of deliberation, the jury found Jason guilty. Judge Scott Becker sentenced Jason Lowe to 50 years in prison, a reduced term due to a plea deal with the prosecution. Jason won't be eligible for parole until at least 2041. At the sentencing, Gary, Jessica's father, felt relieved that justice had been served, but was disturbed by Jason's lack of remorse. 2 of Jason's ex-girlfriends, including Chrissy Chambers, were present at the sentencing. Chambers expressed sympathy for Jessica, warning her to get out of the relationship if she could. Even now, Jason maintains his innocence, claiming the homicide was an accident. Unfortunately, Jessica didn't recognize Jason's true nature until it was too late. She had grown up with a positive male role model in her father Gary, and didn't realize that some men can be deceitful and violent. This tragic story serves as a warning to women to prioritize their own safety, freedom, and well-being, lest they suffer a devastating fate, not just for themselves, but for their loved ones. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Michael Van Eck. Michael Van Eck was born on August 14, 1987, in a city that was once a hub for gold miners. He was the only brother to 4 sisters, Natasha, Michelle, Bianca, and Rihanna. Michael grew up in a close-knit family with caring and loving parents who worked hard to provide a decent life for their children. His father was an entrepreneur, and his mother created a nurturing atmosphere at home that encouraged the growth and development of their kids. Michael was a sociable and kind person who did well in school and sports. He even earned a black belt in karate, which gave him confidence and resilience. After completing his education, Michael trained as an electrician, a profession that offered good earnings and promising job prospects. He worked at mine number 4 of the Beatrix mine in the small town of Unison. In 2011, at the age of 23, Michael decided to register on a dating site to distract himself from a recent breakup and meet new people. That's when he came across the profile of a sweet and smiling girl who shared his interests. They both disliked loud parties and wanted to find true love and build a strong family. Michael was pleasantly surprised to have found a suitable match online. On April 2nd, he excitedly told his mother that he had a date and was busy preparing for it. He even withdrew 3,000 rand from his account to impress the girl. However, he was uneasy about the unusual meeting spot his friend had chosen, the city cemetery, and didn't mention it to his parents. At around 9 p.m. that evening, Michael said goodbye to his family and left the house, getting into his silver Peugeot 2007, a gift from his parents for his coming of age. When he arrived at the cemetery, the girl was running a bit late, but she looked stunning in a white dress and greeted him with a smile. They chatted comfortably, and she suggested they head to a more secluded area of the cemetery. There, they found a romantic setup, a blanket and a basket of fruit and wine. After having a glass of wine, the girl suddenly kissed Michael. But the pleasant feeling quickly turned to pain and horror as he realized he had fallen into a sinister trap. Chana Van Haren was born in 1991, a time of crisis for her parents. Her mother's pregnancy prompted the couple to put their divorce on hold and try to salvage their relationship. However, their efforts ultimately failed, and their home life continued to deteriorate. Chana's mother made no effort to hide her resentment towards her daughter, viewing her as an unwanted reminder of her husband. After the divorce, Chana's mother took the children and left their father behind. Chana suffered from a severe lack of love and attention from her mother, feeling lonely and misunderstood. Among her siblings, Chana struggled the most, growing increasingly withdrawn and sullen from a young age. She exhibited disturbing behaviors, such as talking about death and creating disturbing drawings. Her grandparents, alarmed by her behavior, suspected supernatural influence and took her to church, where she was subjected to an exorcism ritual. Chana's mental health declined as she got older. At 10, she had a disturbing incident where she threatened a house guest with a knife, prompting her family to seek professional psychiatric help. Fortunately, the medication improved her mood, and her father made an effort to spend quality time with her, even taking her on hunting trips. However, Chana later revealed that she found pleasure in harming animals, often bringing home dead creatures. When Chana turned 12, she formed a problematic friendship with an older man who introduced her to harmful substances and took advantage of her vulnerability. 2 years later, her mother moved to New Zealand, leaving Chana and her siblings in the care of their father and stepmother. At 15, Chana became involved with a 22-year-old man who had an unhealthy interest in Satanism, occultism, and voodoo cults. Fortunately, by her 17th birthday, Chana's life started to take a positive turn. She distanced herself from harmful relationships, successfully graduated from high school, and enrolled in college to study art and graphic design. After abandoning her interest in Satanism and ceasing to use harmful substances, Chana's emotional well-being significantly improved. She excelled in her studies and eventually secured a job in her chosen field. Chana's new job provided her with a supportive community, including her colleagues and management, where she discovered her talent for visual arts, earning her respect and recognition. She also started dating Warren, giving the impression to outsiders, including her family and close friends, that her life was back on track. However, beneath the surface, her inner struggles persisted. Her father was especially relieved, hoping she had finally grown up and would soon get married. But an unexpected obstacle emerged, threatening to disrupt her newfound stability. Warren's friend Roy, who claimed to be highly sensitive, sensed a dark and malevolent presence in Chana, despite her kind and friendly nature. His concerns were dismissed due to the contrast between his perceptions and her outward appearance. One day, Roy approached Chana, asking about Norman, a name that kept appearing in his mind, implying she might be unfaithful to Warren. Chana's response was shocking. She spat in his face and demanded he stop questioning her. Chana's friend, Norman, was later revealed to be the name of her imaginary childhood friend, Zazzle. This discovery changed the dynamics among their group of friends. At a party, Chana became interested in 24-year-old Martin. Martin came from a respected and wealthy family, unlike Chana. He had a good relationship with both his parents and was smart, well-mannered, and performed well in school. However, Martin had been struggling with a mental illness since he was 6 years old. He started having hallucinations, claiming that an entity appeared to him, making him believe he had incredible strength. As Martin grew older, his mental condition worsened, leading to problems at school and home. At 14, he was hospitalized in a psychiatric facility and diagnosed with schizophrenia. Although conventional treatment didn't work, his family and doctors eventually found the right medication to control his condition, except for occasional outbursts of aggression. Chana and Martin, two unstable young individuals, started a romantic relationship. Despite their outward appearance of happiness, their parents were oblivious to the issues the couple had faced in the past. As their relationship progressed, it ultimately led to devastating consequences. At first, the couple was social and outgoing, attending parties and interacting with others. Friends recalled noticing cuts on their hands, which they jokingly attributed to intimate experiments. However, as time passed, Chana and Martin began to withdraw from their social circle and developed an interest in dark practices, including Satanism, voodoo, and occult rituals. This fascination eventually extended to infamous serial killers. In 2011, Martins posted a photo with his girlfriend Chana on social media, captioned "Killers" with an ambiguous emoji. At the time, no one took the post seriously. However, unbeknownst to others, the couple had dark fantasies that eventually turned into a sinister plan. They wanted to torture and kill homeless people, and even practiced on animals. But their plan was put on hold, as they couldn't find a suitable victim. Chana created a profile on a dating site and caught the attention of Michael Van Eck. The couple targeted him for their twisted plan, and Chana suggested they meet in person. Michael agreed, despite the unusual meeting location. Chana and Martins carefully prepared for the date, planning every detail, including what to wear and how to end Michael's life. Chana approached the meeting fully prepared, and the trap was set. Michael fell for the bait, and Martins attacked him from behind with a knife. Despite being stabbed around 30 times, Michael resisted, which caught the attackers off guard. Chana intervened, and together, they overwhelmed Michael, who begged them to end his suffering. After the attack, Martin slit his own throat, and the couple began to dismember Michael's body. They severed his legs and decapitated him, placing the body parts in bags. They buried the body in a shallow grave, but couldn't make it deep enough due to lacking shovels. They then left the scene with the body parts using Michael's car, which they later abandoned in a troubled neighborhood. The next day, a cemetery worker discovered the grave and alerted the authorities. Meanwhile, Michael's parents were frantically searching for him, and his workplace reported him missing. The police found Michael's car, which led them to the cemetery, where they uncovered the gruesome crime scene. The local police were already investigating a mysterious body found on the cemetery grounds, with all signs pointing to foul play. They brought Michael Van Eck's family into the picture, as he had gone missing a day earlier. At the cemetery, Michael's mother identified her son's body by recognizing his personal belongings and distinctive childhood burn scars. The autopsy revealed that Michael had suffered multiple knife wounds and signs of struggle. The body had been dismembered after death, with a level of professional precision suggesting the perpetrators had experience with such acts. The evidence pointed to multiple attackers being involved, given the number and nature of the wounds, as well as the strength required to overpower the victim. DNA testing confirmed the body was 23-year-old Michael Van Eck's. During the investigation, police seized Michael's phone and computer, tracing his last communication to Chav Van Haan, who had invited him to the cemetery on the fateful night. When questioned, Chav and her boyfriend Martin confessed to their involvement in the murder. Chav's father was shocked by her calm and defiant confession, in which she claimed to have dreamed of committing such a crime since she started hunting with him. The lack of remorse from the couple shocked everyone, and they seemed to relish the public attention. They had planned to take their own lives if caught, but later changed their minds, wanting to live the life of monsters. The police search of the couple's apartment revealed a disturbing environment. The walls were covered in distorted portraits of Chav, depicting her without eyes, mouth, or ears in various guises. The police found disturbing evidence in the rooms, including ritual items, animal scalps, knives, and unknown objects. They also discovered the belongings of the murdered him, including his glasses and wallet. Martins later admitted that they took the victim's money to fund their next crime. The most shocking discovery, however, was made in the refrigerator. The police found the victim's head with his mouth sewn shut, which suggested that the couple planned to use it as a ritual bowl. Additionally, the victim's eyes and ears were found in separate containers. The police also found the victim's hand and leg buried near the murderer's home, along with the bodies of several animals. The girl's diary revealed her dark thoughts and plans. The evidence suggested that the couple derived pleasure from taking lives and mutilating bodies. Both Martins and Chana underwent mental evaluations, and the commission confirmed that they were aware of their actions and desired the consequences. In November 2011, Chana stood trial as a serial offender, despite it being a single incident. She openly admitted that she did not feel remorse and desired to repeat her actions. Psychiatrists diagnosed Chana with psychopathic and antisocial disorders, making her a more dangerous individual. Throughout the trial, she remained emotionless. Chana was found guilty and sentenced to 35 years in prison without parole, with 20 years for murder and an additional 15 years for robbery and dismemberment. Martins defended himself in court, claiming that he did not remember the events until he was in jail. He admitted to studying Satanism and occultism, which he believed pushed him and Chana to commit the crime. During the trial, he apologized to the victim's parents, although his apology sounded insincere. He implied that the victim was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time, when in reality, the couple had lured him into a premeditated trap. Michael's mother was overcome with grief and struck Martins during one of the sessions. In the end, Martins was also found guilty and sentenced to 35 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after serving half of his sentence. After 2014, Chana and her lover Martins maintained a relationship through letters while he was in prison. In these letters, Martins referred to Chana as a dark goddess and wrote poetic phrases such as, "When you part your lips, words of a dead butterfly spill out, and they fall upon my mystical heart and paint it with sweet poison." However, over time, Chana ended the relationship, feeling that they had become emotionally disconnected from each other. While in prison, Chana exhibited exemplary behavior, teaching her fellow inmates art and theology. Some collectors, fascinated by notorious criminals, paid large sums for a photograph of Chana with her autograph, as well as a print of her hand. Martins also attracted a following, with a fan club that was monitored by the police for a long time to prevent his followers from emulating his violent actions. Despite his circumstances, Martins continued to receive therapy and completed his education through correspondence courses. Ultimately, the case highlights how two unstable individuals, driven by their desires and lacking boundaries, can destroy an innocent life. Furthermore, it reveals how some people, often hiding behind a seemingly normal facade, can harbor dark and sinister intentions. Unfortunately, new acquaintances can sometimes have a profoundly negative impact on our lives, marking a point of no return. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Crystal Rogers. Crystal Rogers, a devoted 35-year-old mother of 4 from Bardstown, Kentucky, shared custody with her ex-husband Keith despite their separation. They maintained a friendly relationship for their children's sake. Crystal lived 45 miles southeast of Louisville with her current boyfriend, Brooks Holt, and their 2-year-old son. As a responsible and reliable parent, Crystal always responded to her mother Sherry Ballard's calls. However, when Sherry couldn't reach Crystal on July 5, 2015, she grew concerned. It was unusual for Crystal to ignore her mother's calls, and Sherry's worry intensified with each passing hour. After 24 hours of silence, Sherry's maternal instincts told her something was wrong. She tried contacting Crystal multiple times, but her efforts were met with silence. Sherry then reached out to Crystal's friends and family, hoping someone could provide information about her daughter's whereabouts. Crystal's family had not seen or heard from her in a while, which was unusual. Her sister Brooke tried to reach her but couldn't, and her boyfriend Brooks said he hadn't seen her since Friday night when she was playing games on her phone before he went to bed. When Brooks woke up the next morning, Crystal was gone, and he thought she might have gone to visit her cousin for the 4th of July. However, Crystal's mother Sherry was worried and tried to contact her, but couldn't. She reported Crystal missing to the police, and just then, her son Casey got a call from a friend who had seen Crystal's car on the side of the road. This made Casey and his father Tommy very concerned, as they knew Crystal would never leave her car behind. When they arrived at the location, they found Crystal's car with a flat tire, which only added to their fear that something was seriously wrong. If Crystal had car trouble, she would have contacted someone for help, not tried to fix it herself. The fact that her keys, phone, and purse was still in the car on the passenger seat was suspicious. Crystal never went anywhere without these belongings, so their presence added to the concern about her safety. After finding her car on the Bluegrass Parkway, Crystal's father and brother notified the Nelson County Sheriff's Department. Investigators searched the car, but found no signs of a struggle. However, they did notice something unusual. The driver's seat was adjusted for someone taller than Crystal. This raised suspicions that someone else might have been driving her car. The authorities asked for witnesses to come forward, but no one provided any useful information to aid the investigation. The police decided to seek the public's help through the media, releasing Crystal's photo and asking for anyone with information to come forward. Despite their efforts, no significant leads were discovered. Crystal's father, Tommy, took matters into his own hands, organizing search parties to find his daughter. However, the challenging hot and humid weather conditions hindered their searches. Many people helped search for Crystal, but one person who was noticeably absent was her boyfriend, Brooks Holt. The police grew suspicious of Brooks because he seemed unconcerned about Crystal's disappearance, especially since she was the mother of his child. When questioned, Brooks claimed that Crystal and their son had gone with him to his family's farm the night before. Brooks said they returned home around midnight, and he went to bed. He stated that Crystal stayed up late playing games on her phone, as she often did. Brooks claimed that when he woke up at 7 a.m., his son was in bed with him, but Crystal was missing. At first, he thought maybe she had gone out with her cousin. However, those close to Crystal disagreed with Brooks' story. They knew Crystal would never leave her 2-year-old son behind, as they were extremely close. In fact, Crystal's sister, Brooke, believed Crystal was planning to leave Brooks because he had been dishonest with her and showed little emotional attachment. Crystal had told her mother, Cher, that she wanted to end her relationship with Brooks, but she was afraid to do so because he was controlling. Crystal's brother, Casey, had also noticed the tension between them and had seen them arguing several times. The police asked Brooks to come in for questioning and gave him a polygraph test, but the results were inconclusive. After the test, Brooks had a formal interview with the detectives. They had gathered evidence that supported his alibi, including a video that showed his truck entering his family's farm and leaving around midnight. However, because the truck had tinted windows, they couldn't determine who was in the vehicle at the time. Brooks explained that while he was at the farm, he did some chores, set a fire to dispose of building materials, and waited for the fire to die out before driving back home. During the interview, the police asked him about a brief 13-second phone call he made to a business associate, Steve Lawson, on his way back from the farm. To clear up any confusion, Brooks asked Steve Lawson to explain their conversation to the police during the interview and called him. However, the police was skeptical when Steve Lawson claimed he had called Brooks to ask for the phone number of a rental property, as it sounded like a rehearsed alibi. According to Steve Lawson, Brooks told him he needed to wait until he got home to get the number from Crystal, who handled such matters. The police were puzzled by this, questioning why Brooks couldn't simply hand the phone to Crystal, who was with him at the time, and resolve the issue right then. They wondered why Brooks had to wait to talk to her in person. During the interview, Brooks received a call from his brother Nick, a police officer at the Bardstown Police Department, who advised Brooks to leave the interrogation room immediately. The police were skeptical that Crystal had voluntarily abandoned her car on the side of the Bluegrass Parkway. They suspected that something had happened to her while she was at the Brooks HW family farm. As the investigation into her disappearance progressed, several people came forward claiming to have seen Brooks's truck and his brother Nick's police car at the Howell family farm. Detectives became increasingly convinced that the brothers were at the farm, attempting to destroy evidence related to Crystal's disappearance. To obtain more information, the police decided to bring Nick, Brooks's brother, in for questioning. They confronted him with eyewitness accounts that placed him at his family's farm on July 8th, and asked him to provide an explanation for his presence there. Nick claimed to have no idea what the police were referring to, and said he wasn't out that night. But the police didn't believe him. They directly asked Nick if he and his brother had destroyed or hidden evidence related to Crystal's disappearance. Nick firmly denied any wrongdoing and swore that his brother was incapable of harming anyone. The police officer, Nick, was adamant that he would never assist in covering up a crime, including helping Brooks. After the interview, Nick agreed to take a polygraph test, but he failed 2 questions: whether he knew Crystal's current location and if he was withholding information about her disappearance. Despite failing the polygraph, Nick insisted he was telling the truth. On October 15th, the police investigation identified Crystal's boyfriend, Brooks Holt, as the prime suspect in her disappearance. The same day, Nick, Brooks' brother, was fired from the Bardstown Police Department for hindering the investigation. Although the police were confident they knew who was responsible for Crystal's disappearance and death, they lacked sufficient evidence to make an arrest. They were hesitant to take their suspect to court without solid evidence, fearing an acquittal would prevent them from retrying the case due to double jeopardy. In Kentucky, the FBI and local law enforcement joined Crystal's friends, family, and volunteers in an extensive search effort at the 240-acre Haar family farm. Despite daily searches, Crystal's loved ones were left frightened and desperate for any news. The searchers hoped to find Crystal safe and sound, but they also needed answers. At the farm, investigators thoroughly examined the remains of a fire, but they didn't find any human remains. They did discover pieces of clothing in the ashes, but they couldn't link them to Crystal's disappearance. The police issued multiple search warrants for the farm, targeting vehicles and homes. However, these searches didn't produce any significant leads or evidence related to Crystal's case. A $100,000 reward was offered for information about her disappearance, but no one came forward with any information. Tommy Ballard, Crystal's dad, was driven to find his daughter. Her disappearance hit him hard, especially since he'd already gone through a similar tragedy. In 1979, his pregnant sister was brutally murdered by her husband and his friend. They shot her, beat her, and then burned and scattered her remains on a farm. Though it took years, the perpetrators were eventually caught, convicted, and sentenced to life in prison. Despite this painful past, Tommy refused to give up on finding Crystal. He pursued every lead, no matter how small, and explored every avenue. He talked to neighbors, interviewed potential witnesses, and contacted anyone who might have information. To aid his search, Tommy spent his own savings on hiring experts, including cadaver dogs and a private investigator. Tommy Ballard was determined to solve the mystery, so he kept detailed records of every tip he followed and clue he found. He regularly met with the police to share his discoveries and get their input. On an early November morning in 2016, Tommy took his 11-year-old grandson, Crystal's son, on a hunting trip on their property. Tommy's wife, Sherry, watched as they left, feeling a sense of unease. She quickly said a prayer, asking God to watch over them in the woods. Sherry then returned to bed, trying to relax. However, just minutes later, the phone rang, shattering her peace. When she answered, she heard her panicked grandson on the other end. "Papa has been shot," he cried, his voice trembling with fear. Sherry's heart sank, and she was overcome with panic. She rushed to the bathroom, grabbing clothes as she went, while her grandson continued to cry on the phone. Sherry quickly reassured her husband, telling him she was calling 911 as she rapidly got dressed. Her mind was flooded with worries about his condition. When she arrived at the scene, she was met with an overwhelming sense of grief. She rushed to Tommy's side, shaking him vigorously, but her distress turned to horror as she saw blood gushing from his nose. When officers and witnesses arrived, they quickly pulled Sherry away from Tommy so that medical personnel could tend to him. However, Sherry knew her husband was already dead. Tommy Ballard was pronounced dead at the scene, having been shot once in the chest. Initially, the police suggested that Tommy's death was a hunting accident, which outraged Sherry. She was adamant that this was not an accident, but rather a deliberate murder. As the investigation unfolded, authorities ruled out the possibility that Tommy took his own life, finding that his weapon had not been fired. They also cleared Tommy's 11-year-old grandson of any involvement in the shooting. Eventually, the Kentucky State Police announced that they were treating Tommy's death as a murder investigation. The Ballard family believes that Tommy's murder was connected to his investigation into his daughter Crystal's disappearance. They think those responsible for harming Crystal wanted Tommy silenced, fearing he might uncover the truth. In 2022, the FBI led a 5-day investigation into Crystal Rogers' disappearance, returning to the Haar family farm to gather more evidence. Their goal was to collect enough evidence to hold the responsible individual accountable. Although the FBI didn't disclose what they found, a spokesperson confirmed in October 2022 that all evidence collected would be analyzed at the FBI's lab in Quantico as the investigation continued. The Kentucky Attorney General made a key decision, appointing a special prosecutor to help with the prosecution of criminal charges related to the deaths of Crystal Rogers and her father, Tommy Ballard. Crystal's mother, Sherry Ballard, was informed of the appointment and strongly supported it, believing it was necessary to ensure justice for her loved ones. In July 2023, a Kentucky grand jury indicted 32-year-old Joseph Lawson on 2 counts: conspiracy to commit murder and tampering with physical evidence, both related to Crystal's disappearance. 2 months later, Crystal's boyfriend, Brooks Houck, was arrested and charged with murder and tampering with physical evidence. The judge set his bond at $10 million and ordered him to avoid contact with Crystal's family. The people of Bardstown felt a mix of emotions when Brooks Houck was arrested for Crystal's murder. While the news was heartbreaking, bringing home the reality that Crystal was not just missing, but had been killed, many felt a sense of satisfaction, knowing that justice would be served. The arrest brought a sense of closure and relief to those affected by Crystal's tragic death. Brooks Houck appeared in court virtually 1 month after his October 2023 arrest. This crucial hearing brought new revelations about another unsolved Bardstown murder. The judge asked prosecutor Shane Young if his team was investigating any other cases connected to Crystal's case. The prosecutor was investigating 2 connected murders: Crystal's murder and the murder of her father, Tommy Ballard. They believed they had the gun used to kill Tommy, which they claimed to have purchased from Nick Houck, who allegedly used a fake name during the sale. Brooks Houck's attorneys requested that the Nelson County judge be disqualified from the case, citing bias and unfair treatment since 2017. They also argued that the $10 million bail was excessive. However, the Kentucky Appeals Court ruled against Houck, upholding the $10 million bond and denying his request to replace the judge. In a separate development, Stephen Lawson was indicted in December 2023 on charges of conspiracy to commit murder and tampering with physical evidence. Notably, Stephen Lawson's son, Joseph Lawson, had been arrested in connection with Crystal's disappearance. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Emmett Corrigan. Ashley Harmon was a vibrant and intelligent person who experienced a challenging time when her parents divorced at the age of 9. During this period, she took on a maternal role, caring for her 5 siblings and protecting them. Ashley's faith was the cornerstone of her life. As a devout Mormon and a member of the Church of Jesus Christ and the Latter-day Saints, she turned to her faith in God for strength and comfort during difficult times. Her unwavering belief provided her with a sense of peace, resilience, and determination, enabling her to overcome obstacles and face challenges with courage. In 2003, while studying human development at Utah State, Ashley met Emmett, a philosophy student. Emmett, like Ashley, had experienced the pain of his parents' divorce at a young age. However, he found solace in the Mormon faith and was baptized into the Church of Jesus Christ and the Latter-day Saints at 17. Ashley was immediately drawn to Emmett's charm, and he reciprocated her feelings. Emmett was immediately smitten with Ashley's intelligence when they first met, and he quickly realized she was the one he wanted to spend the rest of his life with. He confided in his closest friends about his feelings, and their relationship blossomed over the next few months. During Christmas in 2008, Emmett proposed to Ashley, and to his delight, she accepted. The couple tied the knot in a Mormon temple, surrounded by their shared values and beliefs. The ceremony was a beautiful expression of their commitment to each other and their faith. As newlyweds, Emmett and Ashley were filled with joy and excitement as they began their new life together. Their marriage was built on a foundation of stability and happiness, which is deeply rooted in Mormon values. In the Mormon faith, marriage is considered a sacred and eternal bond that transcends mortal life. While divorce is not entirely ruled out, it is strongly discouraged and only permitted under specific, extreme circumstances. In 2005, Ashley and Emmett had twin daughters, and they were thrilled to start their journey as parents. Emmett loved being a father and cherished every moment with his girls. Ashley was happy to be living the life she always wanted. At the time, they were college students at Utah State University, and they managed to balance school with taking care of their babies. Although they faced challenges, their faith and love for each other helped them overcome difficulties. With determination, they pushed through and worked towards a better future. In 2009, Emmett graduated from Utah State University with high honors, went to law school, and passed the bar exam, becoming a bankruptcy attorney. During this time, Ashley stayed at home to care for their growing family, while Emmett focused on building his career. Ashley Corgan took on the role of managing the household and raising their 4 young children. To outsiders, the Corgan family appeared to have a perfect life, a beautiful home, multiple kids, and a fulfilling career for Emmett. But beneath the surface, things were different. In August 2010, Emmett began to feel overwhelmed by the financial burden of providing for his family of 6. To remedy this, Emmett decided to start his own business, a criminal defense firm. Through a friend, he met Candy Hall, a reputable paralegal with experience in criminal law. The two met for lunch and got along well, leading Emmett to hire her for his firm. Candy was married to Robert Hall, a hard worker and devoted father. When Candy landed the job at Emmett's firm, she was initially thrilled, and her husband and children were happy for her. As the stress of building a business and raising their large family took its toll, Ashley noticed a change in her marriage to Emmett. He was overwhelmed by his responsibilities and saw a release by spending excessive time at the gym, often at inconvenient times that left Ashley to care for their 4 children alone. Despite their growing distance, Ashley and Emmett welcomed their 5th child, a son, on January 15, 2011. However, Emmett's behavior was different from when their other children were born. He began spending more and more time away from home, sometimes staying out overnight. Ashley confided in her sister, expressing her genuine concern that Emmett's activities might be evidence of infidelity. Emmett's assistant, Candy Hall, was facing marital problems similar to Ashley's. Candy confided in a friend that her husband Rob was jealous of her working for the charming Emmett. The constant arguing was putting a strain on their relationship. On March 6, 2011, Ashley and Emmett celebrated their 7th wedding anniversary, but Emmett didn't join her. Instead, he claimed to be at a bodybuilding competition, leaving Ashley to take care of their children by herself. Ashley felt anxious about her marriage, wondering if she was to blame for Emmett's unhappiness. Since divorce wasn't an option, she decided to work on improving their relationship. With a fresh resolve on March 11th, Ashley aimed to restore unity to her home. Ashley was determined to repair her strained relationship with her husband Emmett. She spent the entire day planning a perfect evening, attending to every detail to make it special. She cooked his favorite meal, tidied the house, and reminded the children to be on their best behavior. Ashley set the table and waited for Emmett to arrive home from work at 6 p.m. However, he walked in 2 hours late. When she tried to greet him with a kiss, he turned away, leaving her feeling cold. Despite his aloofness and the growing distance between them, Ashley was resolute in her mission to rekindle Emmett's love for her. She firmly believed that their love was worth fighting for and was willing to do whatever it took to salvage their relationship. 2 hours after she had finished preparing dinner, the family finally gathered around the table to eat. But to Ashley's dismay, Emmett claimed he wasn't hungry. Ashley prepared a meal for her husband Emmett, but he showed little interest, leaving her disappointed and hurt. When he claimed he needed to go to Walgreens, Ashley sensed something was wrong and asked him to stay and talk. Emmett responded harshly and left, leaving Ashley confused and hurt. Meanwhile, Emmett's assistant, Candy, was going through a tough time in her marriage to Rob Hall. That same day, Rob decided to pack his bags and leave their home, marking the end of their relationship. Rob had a strong bond with his loved ones, but he needed space. One evening, Rob asked his daughter if she'd borrowed his ex-wife Candy's car. She said no. Later, she drove past Walgreens, saw Candy's car, and called her dad to let him know. Rob's casual response hit a profound impact on two families. Ashley lay awake in bed, her heart filled with worry as she prayed for her marriage to succeed. Despite her efforts to reach him, Emmett wasn't responding to her texts and calls, causing her great unease. Her instincts told her something was wrong, and she felt a sense of dread. Meanwhile, at around 1 p.m., a 911 call reported gunshots and a screaming woman in the Walgreens parking lot. The police responded quickly, unsure of what they would find. They didn't know if it was a random shooting, a botched drug deal, a robbery, or something else. As the first officer approached the scene, he was met with a disturbing sight. A lifeless body on the ground, and another person, wounded and clutching their head in pain. The injured person was rushed to the hospital with a gunshot wound, leaving the police with many unanswered questions. Amidst the chaos, the police were wanted to speak with one woman in particular, Candy Hall, who was present at the crime scene. Candy identified the man in the hospital as her husband Rob, and the deceased man as her boss Emmett. Emmett had suffered 2 gunshot wounds to the head and chest. Shortly after Emmett's body was discovered in the Walgreens parking lot, his wife Ashley received a knock on her door. When she answered, police officers broke the devastating news to her. Her husband Emmett was dead, a victim of a shooting. Ashley was shocked and distraught, unable to fathom what had led to this tragic event. The police then asked Ashley if she was familiar with Rob and Candy Hall. Ashley revealed that she knew Candy as Emmett's assistant, but she had long suspected that the two were having an affair. The police brought Candy in for questioning at the station, determined to piece together the events leading up to Emmett's murder and Rob's shooting. During the interrogation, Candy denied having a romantic relationship with her boss Emmett, and she vehemently rejected any suggestion of intimate relations. According to Candy, she had driven to Walgreens that night solely to pick up a prescription. Candy and Emmett met by chance in a store and decided to take a drive in Emmett's car. During the drive, Candy's phone rang. It was her estranged husband Rob. Candy told Rob she was with Emmett, which sparked Rob's jealousy and led to him making a violent threat against Emmett. After the phone call, Candy and Emmett stopped at a gas station and eventually arrived at Walgreens. When they got out of the car, Candy saw Rob waiting for them, visibly angry. The situation escalated into a heated argument and physical fight between Rob and Emmett. Amidst the chaos, Candy heard 3 loud gunshots and turned to see both men on the ground. She saw a gun lying nearby, picked it up and threw it away. When questioned by detectives, Candy claimed she didn't know who fired the first shots. Rob, who suffered a superficial gunshot wound to the head, was treated at the hospital and then interviewed by detectives. He told them that the gun found at the scene was his, and that it fell out of his pocket during the fight with Emmett at Walgreens. According to Rob, Emmett dove for the gun, and they struggled over it, resulting in Emmett shooting him in the head. Rob claimed he didn't know who shot Emmett during the struggle. The detectives weren't surprised that Rob didn't remember much due to his head wound from the gunshot. However, they did wonder if Emmett had fired the first shot, considering he ended up dead. To get to the bottom of the incident, which occurred in the Walgreens parking lot, the detectives checked the security footage. Upon reviewing the footage, they saw Rob Hall arrive at the parking lot at 9:55 p.m. 1 minute later, he entered the Walgreens store, rushing through each aisle as if searching for someone. The footage then showed Rob leaving the store at 10:06 p.m. and parking his car beside the candy section, where he waited for several minutes. 10 minutes after the shooting, Emmett's truck appeared on security footage as it pulled into the parking lot, but the shooting itself wasn't caught on camera. Although Candy, Emmett's assistant, initially denied having a romantic relationship with her boss, co-workers whispered that they were more than just colleagues. In fact, co-workers often saw Candy and Rob spending time together in Rob's office, with the door closed. Just 3 weeks after she started her job, detectives made a surprising discovery. Emmett had accompanied Candy to the public defender's office to discuss divorcing Rob. During their investigation, crime scene investigators searched Emmett's vehicle and found steroids in the glove compartment, This didn't surprise many of Emmett's loved ones, as he was obsessed with bodybuilding and had been acting strangely, leading them to suspect he was using steroids. When Candy gave her statement to the detectives, she described a distinctive pattern of gunshots that suggested Rob had shot and killed Emmett twice before turning the gun on himself. This evidence was enough for the detectives to obtain an arrest warrant for Rob Hall, charging him with first-degree murder. Rob was arrested and charged with Emmett's murder. The consequences of Rob's actions were severe. If convicted, he faced life in prison without parole or the death penalty. As the trial approached, Ashley, Emmett's wife, hoped it would bring her some closure. She believed that understanding her husband's infidelity and death would help her heal. Prosecutors argued that Rob was angry at Emmett for having an affair with Candy and blamed Emmett for ruining his marriage. According to the prosecution, Rob shot Emmett and then killed himself. However, Rob's defense team told a different story. They claimed Emmett was the aggressor on the night he died, and that he had a history of steroid abuse. They alleged that during the altercation, Emmett grabbed Rob's gun and shot Rob before Rob regained possession and killed Emmett in self-defense. One of the key witnesses in Rob's trial was his wife, Candy. Her testimony differed slightly from her initial statement to the police. Instead of hearing 2 rapid gunshots followed by another, she claimed to have heard a pop, followed by 2 more rapid pops. This new version of events supported the defense's argument that Emmett shot Rob first. To prove Rob was the shooter, prosecutors presented forensic evidence that the type of weapon used in the parking lot shooting left significant gunshot residue, GSR, after firing. Investigators tested Rob and Emmett for GSR and found that Rob's left palm had 32 particles, his right palm had 23, while Emmett had only 1 particle on his left hand and none on his right. The forensic evidence proved that Rob was the one who fired the gun 3 times, and Emmett never possessed the weapon. After careful consideration, the jury found Rob Hall not guilty of first-degree murder, but guilty of second-degree murder, which means the murder was not premeditated. The judge sentenced Rob to 30 years in prison. Rob will be eligible for parole in 2028 when he is 58 years old. Despite the conviction, Rob maintains his innocence and appealed his conviction in 2021, but the Idaho Supreme Court denied him a retrial. 2 months after Emmett's murder, Candy Hall was arrested and charged with embezzlement for allegedly stealing money from her previous employer. This charge was unrelated to Emmett's murder. Candy pleaded guilty and was sentenced to imprisonment, released on parole in 2014, and remains on probation until 2026. In an interview, Candy expressed deep feelings of guilt over the incident, mainly due to its impact on her relationships with her children. She hopes to prove to them that it was a regrettable mistake. Ashley struggled to come to terms with her husband's murder by his lover's husband. In a 2015 interview, she faced Candy Hall for the first time. Despite her emotional pain, Ashley decided to move on and create a new life. She moved out of town with their 5 children, who gradually adjusted to the change and found joy again. Ashley eventually remarried, had 2 more children, and now blogs for victims. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Chris Watts. Shanann Razuchek and Christopher Watts, both from North Carolina, met in 2012. Shanann was from Aberdeen and Chris was from Spring Lake. They tied the knot on November 3rd, 2012, but not everyone was thrilled about their union. Chris's parents, Cindy and Ronnie Watts, didn't attend the wedding, with Cindy later explaining that she didn't get along with Shanann and didn't like how she treated her son. A year after getting married, Shanann and Chris moved to Frederick, Colorado, marking a fresh start in their lives. They were excited to start a family and eventually welcomed 2 daughters, Bella Marie, born on December 17, 2013, and Celeste Catherine, Cece, born on July 17, 2015. Shanann had been diagnosed with lupus, a chronic autoimmune disease, at a young age. Despite the challenges this presented for getting pregnant, Shanann defied the odds and became a mother twice. She was known for her kindness, compassion, and positivity, and was determined to create a happy life for herself and her family. Shanann was a loving and exceptional mother, and her vibrant personality drew people to her. Every morning, she would send her friends heartfelt texts that read, "Good morning, beautiful," making them feel cherished and uplifted. Her daughters, Bella and Cece, were the center of her universe, and she devoted herself to nurturing and supporting them. Shanann was active on social media, sharing videos that offered a glimpse into her daily life and that of her daughters. Her friends and family cherished these videos, which showcased her warm personality. In many of these videos, Shanann expressed her deep admiration for her husband, Chris, portraying him as a loving husband and father. However, those close to the family found Chris difficult to connect with on a deeper level, as he tended to keep to himself. Despite their reservations, Shanann's family and friends accepted Chris because of her deep love for him. However, the couple was struggling financially, and in June 2015, they filed for bankruptcy due to a heavy mortgage, multiple car payments, loans, medical bills, and significant credit card debt. At the time, Chris worked at Anadarko Petroleum, while Shanann worked at a children's hospital call center. However, by 2016, Shanann had changed careers, becoming a consultant for a multi-level marketing company, selling a nutritional supplement administered through a patch. Shanann loved her job, and it showed. As her co-worker Cynthia de Rosette put it, she had a way of making everyone she met feel her positive energy. Despite being happy with her life, Shanann had one wish: to have a baby boy to complete her family with her husband and 2 daughters. In spring 2018, Shanann got an unexpected but wonderful surprise. She was pregnant again. Overjoyed and excited, she wanted to capture her husband Chris's reaction. So she planned to surprise him on May 28th with the news. Further tests confirmed Shanann was having a baby boy. Shanann and Chris chose the name Nico for their new baby. When they told their daughters Bella and Cece they would be big sisters, the girls were happy. In the summer of 2018, when Shanann was pregnant with Nico, she visited her family in North Carolina while Chris stayed behind in Colorado for work. Shanann took her daughters, Bella and Cece, to visit Chris's parents, Cindy and Ronnie, despite having a strained relationship with them. During the visit, Cindy prepared a snack for Cece without considering Shanann's prior warning about Cece's severe nut allergy. As a result, the snack contained peanuts, which put Cece's life in danger. Shanann was deeply disturbed by this incident, feeling that Cindy had recklessly disregarded her granddaughter's safety. Shanann expressed her outrage and disappointment in a text message to Chris, accusing his mother of intentionally trying to provoke her by putting Cece's life at risk. She urged Chris to confront his father about Cindy's behavior, implying that if Chris didn't take action, it would suggest he was complicit in his mother's harmful actions, and that Shanann's concerns for her children's safety were justified. While Shanann was visiting her family in North Carolina, she noticed a sudden change in Chris's communication style. He stopped responding to her messages and calls, leaving her confused and concerned. When she asked him what was going on, Chris explained that he had taken on more responsibilities at work due to the arrival of new employees, but reassured her that everything was fine. A week later, Chris flew to North Carolina to spend time with Shanann and their 2 daughters, Bella and Cece. The girls were excited to see their father and ran to hug him as soon as he arrived. Chris was enthusiastic in his greeting, scooping them up in a tight hug. However, his greeting to Shanann was noticeably colder. Instead of a kiss, he simply nodded at her. Shanann felt hurt and surprised by Chris's distant behavior, and she couldn't help but confide in a friend about her growing concerns through a text message. Shanann felt like she was living with a stranger, not the man she married. She was saddened and confused by the change in Chris. When they were in the same room, he refused to talk to her, and instead, they communicated through their phones. Shanann sent a heartbreaking text to her friend, explaining the situation, and even shared a photo of them sitting on separate couches, facing away from each other. Shanann suspected that Chris might be interested in someone else, which shocked her friend. However, her friend disagreed, saying that Chris loved Shanann too much to do that. But Shanann was devastated because Chris had told her that he no longer thought they were compatible. This was a huge surprise to Shanann, who had always believed their love was strong. Chris had confessed to Shanann that he had hoped getting her pregnant would change his feelings, but it didn't. Shanann was devastated to hear this, as she treasured their relationship and thought their love could overcome any obstacle. Desperate to save her family, Shanann proposed that they attend couples counseling to work through their issues. However, Chris refused. Shanann was willing to do whatever it took to rescue their relationship, but she realized Chris was not willing to meet her halfway. Despite her best efforts, Shanann came to understand that Chris was unwilling to compromise on anything. After their return to Colorado from North Carolina, the family settled back into their routine. However, Shanann soon left for another business trip, this time to Arizona. During her trip to Arizona, Shanann's friends noticed a change in her behavior. She seemed confused, distressed, and not her usual cheerful self. One evening, while they were all in their hotel room, Shanann opened up to her friends about her concerns. She told them that Chris had expressed doubts about their relationship and refused to go to couples therapy. On August 11th, while Shanann was still in Arizona, she received a notification on her phone about a restaurant charge on her and Chris's account. The amount of the charge raised her suspicions, and she wondered if Chris was having dinner with someone else. This made her feel uneasy and doubtful. When Shanann returned home from her trip on August 13th, her friend Nicole Atkinson drove her home. Their doorbell camera captured Shanann entering her house at around 1:48 a.m. The next morning, Shanann's friends became worried when they didn't receive their usual good morning messages from her. They knew she had an important doctor's appointment at 9:30 a.m. and were concerned that something might be wrong. When Shanann missed a 12:30 p.m. business meeting, her close friend Nicole Atkinson became alarmed. As the day went by with no word from Shanann, Nicole's concern grew. She sensed something was off. Feeling a strong urge to act, Nicole drove to Shanann's house. As she arrived, she felt a knot in her stomach. Shanann's van was parked in the garage, and her daily shoes sat by the front door. Nicole knocked on the front door, hoping Shanann would emerge, explaining that she had overslept after her flight the previous day. But there was no response. One of Shanann's friends contacted her husband Chris, telling him they couldn't reach her. Chris reassured them, thinking Shanann might have taken their daughters to a friend's house. Shannan's friends were puzzled by Chris's response because they had all been in touch with each other, and none of them knew where Shanann was. She had no plans to meet up with any of them. As a result, her friends told Chris they planned to contact the Frederick Police Department to report Shanann and their daughters, Bella and Cece, as missing. However, Chris did not want to involve the police. One of Shannan's friends, Nicole, was so worried that she went ahead and called 911 to report the three missing. After Nicole's call, a police officer from the Frederick Police Department arrived at the Watts home. The officer's body cam footage showed Nicole's distress as she explained what she knew about Shanann and her daughters. When Chris arrived, he approached the officer, but unlike Nicole, he did not appear to be very concerned, despite his wife and daughters being missing. During a search of Shanann and Chris's home, the officer found Shannan's purse, which contained her medication and that of her two daughters. This finding concerned Shannan's friend Nicole, but Chris, her husband, remained unusually calm. The officer also discovered Shannan's wedding pants on the bedside table. Afterwards, the officer and Chris went to a neighbor's house to review the footage from their security camera. The camera captured footage of Chris's driveway and garage, showing him opening the garage door, moving around, and leaving the house at 5:28 a.m. When Chris watched the footage with the police, his behavior changed. He became nervous and fidgety, which didn't go unnoticed by his neighbor, who suggested to the officer that Chris wasn't acting normal. Chris's reluctance to search for his wife and daughters, Bella and Cece, raised concerns among Shannon's friends, who found it incomprehensible that he wasn't worried about their disappearance. As the investigation unfolded, the police canvassed the neighborhood, asking residents if they had seen Shannon or anything unusual. The FBI and the Colorado Bureau of Investigation joined the search the next day, along with the Boulder Police Department's cadaver dogs, which searched the property and inside the house. During the search, an officer handling a cadaver dog commented that the house smelled of cleaning products and seemed unusually clean. The officer's suspicions were raised by a comment, leading them to inspect the cleanliness of the home more closely. The presence of cleaning products hinted that someone might have tried to hide evidence or erase potential clues. While his house was being searched, Chris gave an interview to 2 Denver news stations outside his residence. During the interview, Chris claimed that he and Shannon hadn't argued before she left, but he did mention they had an emotional conversation. Chris appealed to whoever was holding his family, begging for their return and expressing his desire to be reunited with them. He emphasized that his house felt empty without them, but his behavior during the interview raised concerns. Chris appeared cold and unemotional, which surprised those who knew him. Shannon's friends, who watched the interview, were disgusted by Chris's nonchalant demeanor, finding it strange and contradictory to his plea for his family's return. On August 14th, Special Agent Coda conducted an interview with Chris. During the conversation, Chris suggested that Shannon might have taken the girls to a friend's house to unwind. Meanwhile, the police station received a flood of tips about possible sightings of Shannon and the girls. The department received various photos, which Chris was asked to review to see if he could identify his missing wife and daughters. However, he was unable to provide any identifications. Agent Coda also asked Chris about his marriage to Shannon during the interview. Chris claimed that he had never been unfaithful to Shannon, and, to the best of his knowledge, she had never been unfaithful to him either. He explained that they were the type of couple who would confide in each other if they ever felt tempted to stray. One notable aspect of Chris's behavior during the interview caught Agent Coda's attention. Chris frequently made hand movements towards his neck. Agent Coda's intuition was growing stronger, suggesting the movements might be pointing to a more sinister truth. During the interview, Agent Coda stepped out briefly to share his concerns with the other officers, suspecting Chris might have strangled Shannon. As the hours ticked by with no sign of Shannon and her daughters, the loved one's anxiety turned to desperation. Despite their fears for Shannon's safety, they held on to the glimmer of hope that Bella and Cece might still be alive. The lack of updates from the authorities only added to their distress. After a 3-hour interrogation, Chris was released from the police department, but the police instructed him to return the next day, August 15th, for a polygraph test. Here's what happened. Chris agreed to take a polygraph test to help with the investigation into his family's disappearance. On August 15th, Chris picked up his father from the airport and went to the Frederick Police Department, where Tammy Lee from the Colorado Bureau of Investigation administered the test. During the test, Chris denied any involvement in his family's disappearance and claimed not to know where his wife Shannon was. However, the results of the test were not in Chris's favor. This led the detectives to strongly suspect that Chris was responsible for the deaths of his wife and daughters. Tammy Lee, a highly skilled polygrapher, confronted Chris about the test results. Chris admitted that he had caused Shannon emotional pain, but denied physically harming her. He also confessed to having an affair with a co-worker named Nicole Kessinger, which he deeply regretted. Despite his confessions, Chris still denied any involvement in his family's disappearance. At one point, he asked to have his father, Ronnie, present during the interview. The officers were hesitant, worried that this might lead Chris to ask for a lawyer. Chris Watt's father was allowed to accompany him in the interrogation room, a risky move that detectives hoped would prompt Chris to confess. And it worked. Chris admitted to killing Shanann, but claimed he did so because she had harmed their daughters, Bella and Cece. However, this excuse was immediately met with skepticism by Shanann's friends, who knew she would never hurt her children. In fact, Shanann was eagerly awaiting the birth of her third child, a son named Nico. During the interrogation, Chris disclosed the location of Shanann's body, which he had buried in a shallow grave at one of his work sites. He also revealed that he had disposed of his daughters' bodies in oil tanks. Despite this, Chris continued to deny any involvement in their deaths. Even after being arrested and taken into custody, the detectives never believed Shanann was responsible for harming her daughters. In the end, Chris pleaded guilty to avoid the death penalty and was sentenced to life in prison without parole. At the sentencing hearing for Chris, the judge expressed outrage over the brutal crime Chris had committed, calling it the most inhumane and vicious one he had seen in his entire career of handling thousands of cases. Years later, Chris confessed to murdering his wife Shanann in their bed. According to Chris, he strangled her after she discovered his infidelity and threatened to take their daughters away. Chris then put Shanann's body in his truck and drove to his work site with their two daughters. Tragically, Chris admitted to killing his daughters one by one at the site, with one daughter forced to witness the murder of her sister before meeting the same fate. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Ryan Poston. Ryan Poston was born on December 30th, 1982 in Fort Mitchell, Kentucky, and grew up with three loving sisters. His parents provided him with an adventurous upbringing, allowing him to attend schools in Switzerland and the Philippines. Ryan's good looks, charming features, and charismatic personality made him a standout among his peers. After completing high school, he attended Indiana University, where he excelled in his studies, graduating with honors in 2005 with a triple major in political science, history, and geography. Following in his family's footsteps, Ryan pursued a career in law and enrolled in Salmon P. Chase College of Law at Northern Kentucky University. His ultimate goal was to run a successful law firm, providing fair and competent legal representation to those who couldn't afford high-priced attorneys. After a painful breakup in 2011, Ryan turned to his cousin, Carissa, for support. During this time, he regularly visited her in Lexington, Kentucky, where he met Shayna Hubers, a native of the city. Shayna was a charming and lively individual with a warm personality that drew people to her. Despite their 8-year age difference, their mutual attraction grew stronger with each visit Ryan made to Lexington. As they spent more time together, their connection deepened. Shayna began to spend more weekends in Highland Heights, where Ryan lived, taking care of him and cooking for him. However, their promising future came to a devastating end on October 12, 2012. In a distressing 911 call, Shayna revealed that she had just killed her boyfriend Ryan. She described a harrowing scene of domestic violence that had escalated out of control, claiming that Ryan had attempted to physically abuse her and confronted her with a gun. According to Shayna, she panicked and pulled the trigger, shooting Ryan, and then shot him several more times, believing she was putting him out of his misery. Within minutes of Shayna's call, officers arrived at the scene, responding to the shocking tragedy. When police officers arrived, they told Shayna to come out of the apartment with her hands up. At first, she was hesitant, but she eventually complied. As she walked out, the officers told her to lie down on the ground. Shayna was clearly upset as she followed their instructions. After handcuffing her and putting her in the patrol car, the officers went into the apartment and found Ryan Poston's body on the dining room floor, covered in blood. The crime scene investigators found that the apartment was slightly messy, but nothing out of the ordinary for a 29-year-old man. The investigators learned that Ryan had a concealed carry permit and owned guns, including the Sig Sauer semi-automatic that Shayna used to shoot him. From the evidence, they determined that Ryan was sitting at the table when Shayna shot him. They knew this because of the blood on the table. However, the fact that many items on the table were undisturbed raised doubts about Shayna's story. If there had been a fight, the items would have been disturbed. The investigators searched the apartment thoroughly, while other officers canvassed the neighborhood, looking for additional information. One neighbor, Nikki, provided valuable information to the detective. Nikki knew Shayna well and believed that Ryan didn't return Shayna's dedication to him. According to Nikki, they frequently argued, often disturbing the peace. Months earlier, Nikki recalled an incident where Shayna came to her door in tears, saying she was afraid of Ryan. Shayna claimed that Ryan had picked her up and thrown her down the hallway, injuring her. Nikki encouraged Shayna to report the abuse to the police, but Shayna chose not to. At the police station, detectives took Shayna to an interrogation room to question her about shooting Ryan. Before questioning her, they read her Miranda rights, informing her of her right to an attorney. Shayna exercised this right and requested an attorney. However, she chose to talk to the detectives despite this. When asked about the victim, Shayna replied, "The man I killed," which showed a sense of detachment. She claimed she acted in self-defense, saying Ryan had grabbed her by the throat and thrown her around the apartment. Shayna described the night as surreal and out of body. Later in the interview, she added that Ryan had said mean things to her, taunting her while holding a gun, and that he was under the influence of drugs. Shayna maintained that she shot Ryan because she believed he was going to kick her out of his condo. She said she picked up the gun and shot him once, and then shot him several more times after seeing him twitch. During her confession, Shayna revealed that Ryan was vain and wanted a nose job, so she shot him in the face to grant his wish. During the intense questioning, Shayna revealed her worries about her schoolwork and how having a dead boyfriend would affect her future relationships. She was specifically concerned that no one would want to marry her once they found out she had killed her boyfriend in self-defense. The detective listened to her statement, but ultimately arrested her and charged her with Ryan's murder. Shayna appeared genuinely surprised by her arrest, claiming she had acted in self-defense when she shot him. In 2015, Shayna's trial began, filling the courtroom with anticipation. The prosecutor started by comparing Shayna to Jodi Arias, who had also been accused of murdering her boyfriend, Travis Alexander. The similarities between the two cases added to the tension in the courtroom as everyone waited for the verdict. The prosecutor believed that Shayna was obsessed with her ex-boyfriend Ryan, and that he was all she could think about. Ryan's friends testified that he wanted to end their relationship and was avoiding Shayna's calls and messages. Despite this, Shayna would often show up uninvited at Ryan's condo in Highland Heights. On the night Ryan was murdered, the prosecution presented evidence that he had a date planned with Audrey Bolt, a former beauty queen. The prosecution suggested that Shayna was motivated by jealousy and anger towards Ryan's new love interest. Audrey Bolt testified that Ryan stood her up on the night of the murder. She had no idea he had been shot and killed until later. The prosecution presented evidence that Ryan had told his father he wanted to break up with Shayna, and his father advised him to be kind to her to avoid a messy breakup. However, Ryan and Shayna exchanged texts on the day of the murder, with Ryan telling her he didn't want to see her. Despite this, Shayna showed up at his condo uninvited. The prosecution believed that during an argument, Ryan told Shayna he was done with her and that she could no longer control him. This allegedly enraged Shayna, who then picked up a gun and shot Ryan. The prosecution played a video of Shayna's police interrogation, which they claimed showed her to be a cold-blooded murderer. In the video, Shayna appears carefree and unemotional, which the prosecution argued was inconsistent with someone who had just killed in self-defense. However, this interpretation was open to interpretation by the jury. The defense argued that Ryan was acting erratically and violently on the night of the murder due to drugs he was taking, including anti-anxiety medication and amphetamines. The autopsy results showed that these drugs were present in Ryan's system. The defense claimed that Shayna shot Ryan in self-defense. The evidence suggested that the substances he was using influenced his actions. To support this idea, Shayna's lawyers called an expert in toxicology to testify on her behalf. The expert stated that a combination of anti-anxiety medications and amphetamines could cause someone to become violent and paranoid. The defense presented this expert testimony to create a reasonable explanation for Shayna's actions, questioning whether she had intentionally meant to harm anyone. During Shayna's trial in April 2015, the prosecution became worried that the jury might be swayed by Shayna's self-defense claim, particularly because she was smart, young, and attractive. These fears were alleviated on April 23rd when the jury delivered a guilty verdict, convicting Shayna of murdering her boyfriend, Ryan Poston. However, at the sentencing hearing in August 2015, Shayna continued to blame Ryan for his own death, which outraged his friends and family. Shayna claimed she was innocent throughout the trial and refused to take responsibility for her actions, despite the evidence against her. In Kentucky, defendants who are victims of domestic violence may be eligible for reduced parole after serving just 20% of their sentence. However, the judge didn't believe Shayna qualified for this reduced parole, citing that her crime was a premeditated murder. As a result, Shayna was sentenced to 40 years in prison, making her eligible for parole in 17 years, at the age of 41 in 2032. After her sentencing, Shayna appealed for a new trial, which was granted in August 2016. The reason for the appeal was that one of the jurors had a felony conviction, which they had concealed. This violated Kentucky law, as felons are not allowed to serve on juries. In August 2018, Shayna's second trial for Ryan Poston's murder began, 4 months later than expected. Her defense attorney presented opening arguments, stating that during her year-and-a-half relationship with Ryan, Shayna tried her best to make him happy. However, their relationship suffered as a result. The defense attorney claimed that on the night Shayna met Ryan, he was violent toward her, both physically and sexually. This incident had a lasting impact on Shayna, causing her to take several weeks to respond to his messages afterwards. Additionally, the defense team argued that Shayna had a history of trauma, stemming from a sexual assault she experienced in high school. This led to her struggles with alcohol abuse and promiscuity. They claimed that this traumatic experience contributed to her behavior on the night of Ryan's murder. The defense team's strategy was to present a sympathetic portrayal of Shayna, highlighting her troubled past and arguing that she was not responsible for her actions on the night of the murder. They aimed to challenge the prosecution's narrative and convince the jury that her behavior was driven by a combination of factors, including a history of abuse and a toxic relationship with Ryan. Shayna's defense team claimed that she was a victim of domestic violence by Ryan, rather than a cold-blooded killer. They argued that her actions were a result of years of abuse, not driven by revenge or financial gain. The defense pointed out that Ryan constantly belittled Shayna about her weight and breast size, making her feel insecure and inadequate. This, they said, contributed to her low self-esteem. The defense also stated that Shayna and Ryan's sexual relationship was troubled, marked by frequent arguments and frustration on both sides. They claimed that Ryan's desire for a more intimate connection was unfulfilled, leading to a growing rift between them. The defense presented evidence that Shayna had received a treatment to improve her romantic life. They claimed that she got this treatment to address sexual problems in their relationship and strengthen their bond. The defense argued that Ryan's consistent lack of interest and rejection made things worse, causing Shayna to become more and more frustrated and disconnected from him. The defense claimed that Ryan often broke up with Shayna, only to pursue relationships with other women. However, the prosecution clarified that they were not trying to portray Ryan as a perfect partner, but rather as someone who was not abusive. The prosecution argued that Shayna did not kill Ryan in self-defense, but rather because he had finally ended their toxic relationship on the night of the shooting. They believed Ryan had every reason to break up with Shayna, as she continued to harass him even after their previous breakups. Despite Ryan's efforts to end the relationship, Shayna consistently returned. The prosecution saw this as evidence of Shayna's inability to let go of the relationship. A friend of Ryan's testified that this breakup was different, as Ryan had never had the courage to end things with Shayna in person before, implying that this time, the breakup would be permanent. Ryan accused Shayna of trying to hold on to him. To support this claim, the prosecution presented texts where Shayna told her friends that the romantic interactions with Ryan had brought them closer. However, Shayna testified in her own defense, contradicting Ryan's claim. She said that their romantic interactions had actually driven them apart. In a separate text exchange, Shayna asked Ryan for sex, but he declined due to the side effects of his antidepressant medication, which had reduced his libido. Despite these conflicting accounts, Shayna testified that Ryan had forcibly had sex with her. After 5 hours of deliberation, the jury again found Shayna guilty of murdering Ryan, despite the contradictory testimonies and evidence. The jury confirmed their original verdict, and during the sentencing hearing, Shayna's mother emotionally addressed the judge, sharing stories of her daughter's remarkable singing talent, which had earned her multiple college scholarships. Through tears, she asked the jury to consider granting Shayna parole, emphasizing that her daughter still had the potential to positively impact others' lives. Shayna's mother made it clear that her plea did not diminish the profound grief and pain experienced by the family of Ryan Poston. Despite her mother's emotional appeal, Shayna was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. According to the sentence, Shayna must serve at least 17 years before becoming eligible for parole in 2032. She is currently serving her sentence at the Kentucky Correctional Institute for Women in Pewee Valley. Friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Sandra Cantu. Sandra Cantu was an 8-year-old girl who lived with her mother, Maria Chavez, and their family in the Orchard Estates mobile home park in Tracy, California. Despite her parents being separated, Sandra remained close to her father and enjoyed a positive relationship with him. Sandra was a friendly and energetic child who loved playing with her friends in the neighborhood. She was known for her bright smile and optimistic outlook, making her a favorite among her peers and the adults who knew her. At the time, she was a second-grade student at Melville S. Jacobson Elementary School. On March 27, 2009, Sandra returned home from school around 2 p.m. and went out to play with her friends. Her mother, Maria, usually let her play outside until dinner time. However, when Sandra failed to return home by 7 p.m., Maria began to worry. Maria tried to locate Sandra by calling her friends, but none of them had seen her. She then drove around the neighborhood, asking people if they had seen Sandra, but no one had any information. At 7:53 p.m., Maria called 911 to report her daughter missing. The Tracy Police Department quickly responded to the mobile home park and launched a search operation. They asked Maria to describe Sandra's clothing, which included a pink Hello Kitty shirt, black leggings, and Hannah Montana flip-flops. The police then went door to door, questioning neighbors and showing Sandra's picture to gather information. The search for Sandra was a large-scale operation that involved the FBI, cadaver dogs, helicopters, and a team of volunteers. The police showed Sandra's photos to everyone in the community, hoping to find any leads. However, their initial efforts yielded no results. Police are worried as Sandra always followed safety rules when leaving with her family. They suspect someone familiar might have lured her. Initially, they suspect her father Daniel, who hadn't seen her in a long time, and was in a financial dispute with her mother Maria. However, he's eventually cleared. The police then focus on an unfamiliar ice cream vendor and Frank Waller, a rumored pedophile who allegedly kissed Sandra 2 years prior. Frank admits to being attracted to young girls, but is eventually eliminated. Authorities will continue to monitor him. As the search continues, the community supports Maria. During a vigil, a neighbor finds a disturbing handwritten note near a mailbox and shares it with the officers. A cryptic message was discovered, stating, "Cantu locked in stolen suitcase, thrown in water on Bachet Road and Whitehall Road. Witness." The note's spelling mistakes and suspicious appearance raised questions about its authenticity and the intentions of its writer. Investigators needed more information and decided to interview Melissa, Sandra's neighbor and a Sunday school teacher at her grandfather's church. Melissa explained that she had recently gone through a divorce and a breakup, and now lived with her grandparents and her 5-year-old daughter. Sandra and her sisters often visited Melissa's trailer to play with her daughter, which created a close bond between the two families. When Melissa was questioned, she admitted that she didn't notice anything unusual when she found the note, and she allowed the FBI to search her car. Inside the glove compartment, they found a note with scribbled words, suggesting someone tried to conceal the message. The note was sent for further analysis, and Melissa was released. Weeks passed without any sign of Sandra, but her case took a shocking turn when her body was found inside a black suitcase in an irrigation pond. The suitcase had floated to the surface after the pond was filled 2 weeks prior. Sandra's body was identified by the clothes she was wearing, and an autopsy revealed that she had many cuts and wounds. The suitcase was locked and had an extra cord securing it, indicating that the killer wanted to keep it closed for a longer time. The grim discovery left everyone in shock and horror. The farmer who found the suitcase, Jose Luis Franco, was rewarded $20,000 for alerting the authorities. The autopsy revealed that Sandra had been severely assaulted, with no signs of biological fluids, but indications of an unknown object being used. The cause of death was asphyxiation, and a high dose of alprazolam was found in her system, suggesting she had been drugged. The official cause of death was ruled as homicidal asphyxiation. Tragically, it was determined that Sandra had been murdered just hours after she was last seen on surveillance footage, sending shockwaves through the community. The investigation revealed that Sandra's killer was not a random abductor, but someone she knew. The police pieced together a profile of their potential suspect. A white male, aged between 25 and 40, with a history of sexual assault or possessing child abuse material. The investigation took a surprising turn when a neighbor reported seeing a dark purple, two-toned SUV near the irrigation pond on the day Sandra disappeared. The car's unusual color and unfamiliarity in the area raised suspicions, and the neighbor's description matched a woman named Melissa Huckabee. Surveillance cameras showed Melissa getting into her SUV near Sandra's house around 3:30 p.m. and then driving towards her own house. She was later seen near the pond around 5:30 p.m. This timeline placed Melissa in the area around the time Sandra went missing, making her a prime suspect. However, when the police approached Melissa, they found that she had attempted suicide by ingesting razor blades and was hospitalized. When questioned later, Melissa claimed she was unaware of what had transpired and had only brought a note to the attention of the authorities. She denied any involvement in Sandra's murder. The police investigated Melissa's alibi and found that her phone records were crucial evidence. Earlier, Melissa had reported a theft to the police, claiming that her suitcase was stolen from her driveway around 4 p.m. She even sent a text message to Maria, mentioning the stolen suitcase. This was significant because the suitcase found with Sandra's body matched the one Melissa reported stolen. Despite the evidence, The authorities wanted more information, so they wiretapped Melissa's phone and waited for her hospital release. When she was released, they were shocked to discover that she had called the Cantu family. Melissa invited one of Sandra's siblings to her home, but when the police responded, they found no children, suggesting that Melissa might have been planning to lure another child to her house. A neighbor then came forward, revealing that Melissa had taken a 7-year-old girl to the park without permission, and she was found to have been drugged with benzodiazepines, the same drug found in Sandra's body. The police suspicion of Melissa grew, and they discovered a notebook in her trailer with handwriting matching the note she claimed to have found. They also found a cryptic note in her car and a drug prescribed to her that matched the one in Sandra's body. During a search of her grandparents' church, they found a rolling pin with blood that matched Sandra's DNA profile and a window blind missing a drawer cord, which matched the cord used to secure the suitcase. This led to Melissa's arrest on suspicion of kidnapping and murder. Melissa Huckabee, a California woman, has been accused of killing 8-year-old Sandra Cantu and faces multiple charges, including sexual assault. Authorities do not expect to make any further arrests in the case. When questioned by investigators, Huckabee initially denied any involvement, but later claimed that Sandra's death was an accident. She said she was playing a game of hide-and-seek with Sandra and her own daughter, and Sandra agreed to hide in a suitcase. Huckabee claimed she forgot Sandra was inside and only remembered when she arrived at a church, finding Sandra's lifeless body. Huckabee eventually confessed to zipping Sandra into the suitcase and leaving her there until it was too late. She then dumped the suitcase containing Sandra's body into a nearby pond. Further investigation into Huckabee's personal life revealed a troubled past, including criminal activities, depression, and other mental health issues. She had a history of theft convictions and had filed for bankruptcy due to credit card debt and medical expenses. Huckabee's family members, including her father and ex-husband, described her as struggling with depression and having issues with her self-image. Despite this, they said she was not prone to violent behavior. Huckabee is currently under suicide watch and faces multiple charges related to Sandra's death. The trial of Melissa Huckabee began on April 14th. During the proceedings, she became emotional when the prosecution described her criminal actions. She closed her eyes and struggled to hold back tears. Prosecutor Thomas Tester presented evidence that Melissa had planned Sandra's murder. Surveillance footage showed that Sandra had intended to visit Melissa's house. The prosecutor alleged that Melissa took Sandra to a church, where she gave her juice laced with a powerful sedative. Once Sandra was unconscious, Melissa attacked and suffocated her to death. Initially, the prosecutor sought the death penalty against Melissa, as she had not yet pleaded guilty to the crimes. However, during the trial, Melissa made a sudden decision to plead guilty, taking full responsibility for her actions. Before accepting her plea, Judge Linda Luss questioned Melissa to ensure she had discussed the matter with her lawyers and was certain about giving up her right to a jury trial. Melissa confirmed that she was resolute in her decision. Prosecutor Thomas Tester raised concerns about Melissa Huckabee's mental state after Judge Luss finished questioning her. He cited her unusual behavior in prison, including a self-harm incident, which made him question her ability to make rational decisions. Although Melissa seemed coherent in court, Tester worried about her decision-making in the long run. Despite Judge Luss's reassurance, Tester asked Melissa if she understood the situation, likely fearing she might retract her guilty plea. Melissa's admission of guilt marked a significant turning point in the case, bringing some closure to the Cantu family and avoiding a lengthy trial. This crucial moment simplified the legal proceedings and provided the Cantu family with some comfort after Sandra's tragic death. It also paved the way for what would happen next in the case. On June 14, 2010, Melissa Huckabee was sentenced to life in prison without parole for the intentional and premeditated murder of Sandra Cantu. The prosecution alleged three special circumstances in this case. Firstly, it was alleged that Huckabee committed the murder while kidnapping Sandra Cantu, a violation of Penal Code Sections 207 and 209. Secondly, it was alleged that Huckabee committed the murder while engaged in another crime. Thirdly, it was alleged that Huckabee committed the murder during or immediately after attempting to commit rape by instrument, a violation of Penal Code Section 289, as defined in Penal Code Section 1.2. The prosecution has warned that any evidence presented at a preliminary hearing may also be used in future probation violation proceedings or discovery requests. Melissa Huckabee is accused of murdering Sandra Cantu and initially faced additional charges for drugging a 7-year-old girl, although these charges were later dropped as part of a plea deal to avoid the death penalty. Melissa has pleaded guilty to the first-degree murder and kidnapping of Sandra Cantu. Her heinous crime against a young girl in Tracy, California shocked the nation, and today the court will determine her punishment. This morning, there will be 2 hearings related to the Sandra Cantu murder case. The first hearing will focus on Melissa's sentencing, followed by a decision on whether to lift the gag order. Our correspondent, Latia Arra, is reporting live from outside the San Joaquin County Courthouse in Stockton, where it promises to be a very busy day. In just 3 hours, Melissa Huckabee will be formally sentenced for the murder and kidnapping of 8-year-old Sandra Cantu. The community and Sandra's family are eager for the proceedings to come to an end. Last month, Melissa pleaded guilty and will likely spend the rest of her life in prison without parole. As part of her plea deal, the rape charge against Melissa was dropped, sparing her from the death penalty. During her sentencing, Melissa expressed remorse and confusion over her actions, directly addressing Sandra's mother. She acknowledged that she couldn't understand her own motivations, saying that she wished she could give an explanation for what had happened, and that she still couldn't understand why she had done what she had done. Melissa also apologized, saying that for the pain she had caused, saying sorry wasn't enough, but it was all she could do. She added that since the day Sandra had died, she had had to live with the consequences of her actions, and that for the rest of her life, she would have to live with the responsibility of Sandra's death. Sandra's father expressed his struggle to forgive Melissa, saying that they were supposed to forgive their enemies, but he didn't know what to make of her. He added that nothing that happened that day would change the fact that she had taken the life of an innocent little girl who hadn't even gotten to decide what ice cream to eat. The community was deeply affected by Sandra's tragic death. On April 16, 2019, over 600 people attended her funeral to pay their respects. To honor her memory, volunteers planted a tree and built a new playground at Jacobson Elementary School, and one of her cousins started an annual celebration called Tracy Celebrates Children, which helps local kids get fingerprinted and photographed in case they go missing. The prosecutors believed that Melissa deliberately planned and executed the tragic event, but she never shared her motives, leaving investigators baffled. Melissa's past struggles with depression, difficult history, and self-harm were revealed in documents, but they didn't provide a clear explanation for her actions. Melissa is now serving a life sentence in San Juan County Jail, a constant reminder that serious crimes have serious consequences. While the pain of losing Sandra will never fully heal, her family finds solace in knowing that justice has been served, and her death did not go unanswered. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Agnes Klavina. Agnes Klavina was born on July 8, 1984, in Riga, the capital of Latvia. She was the younger of 2 daughters, with her sister Greta being only a couple of years older. As a result, the 2 sisters were extremely close and friendly. Their parents made every effort to provide their daughters with a good education and support their dreams. Agnes developed into a sociable, cheerful, and active individual. She excelled in school participated in sports, and had many friends. Her future aspirations involved a career in tourism or entertainment, as she loved traveling and organizing leisure activities. With her striking appearance and impressive physique, Agnes consistently received attention and compliments from men. From a young age, Agnes had numerous admirers vying for her attention. Following her graduation from school, she worked in the service industry while taking language courses and studying tourism management. At the age of 20, Agnes relocated from Latvia to the United Kingdom, settling in London. She believed that this move would provide her with greater opportunities to unlock her full potential and showcase her talents. Parents and an older sister were supportive of her decision. After the move, Agnes met Michael Mills, an older man with a good education and a thriving business. He owned a small movie theater and entertainment complex, and was considered successful. Agnes and Michael quickly hit it off and began dating. Michael showered Agnes with expensive gifts, and they traveled together, making plans for their future. They were truly in love and happy, and it seemed like a long and prosperous life awaited them. According to those close to Agnes, this was her first true love. She glowed when she was with Michael and dreamed of becoming his wife. In 2014, Agnes was offered a 3-month contract as an administrator at a popular nightclub in Marbella, Spain. Although this meant a temporary move, Agnes didn't want to pass up the opportunity. Michael couldn't leave his job to go with her, but he didn't oppose her signing the contract. For Agnes, it was a chance to gain experience and potentially develop her career in a new field. Marbella is a renowned and appealing resort on the Mediterranean coast, attracting vacationers from worldwide, particularly affluent individuals seeking entertainment and luxury. It's a popular spot for celebrities, athletes, and business moguls. Agnes, being a sociable person, enjoyed working in such a vibrant environment. Before relocating, she visited her family in Latvia and shared the news about her 3-month employment contract. She also announced her plans to marry Michael after returning to England, which delighted her parents and sister. In late May 2014, Agnes moved to Spain with only the essentials, leaving her lover Michael in London. Despite the distance, they maintained daily communication through phone calls and video chats, keeping each other updated on their lives. Agnes Klavina was active on social media, where she shared daily updates about her life through photos, videos, and stories. As a result, she gained a large following of people who were interested in her activities and work. Her posts made it clear that she lived a busy, exciting life and made the most of every day. When her employment contract ended, Agnes decided to extend her stay in Spain for a few more months. It was the start of the peak tourist season in the resort town, and she saw an opportunity to earn a good income. After discussing her plans with her boyfriend, he gave her his support and promised to visit her for a few days. They had been apart for a long time and were eager to see each other. Agnes quickly found a new job as a hostess at an upscale restaurant and renewed her apartment lease. In September, her boyfriend, Michael, visited her as planned. They spent their time together having fun, making plans for their upcoming wedding, and researching honeymoon destinations. However, their time together was short-lived, as Michael returned to London less than a week later. Agnes was left to work in Spain for another month, after which she intended to visit her relatives in Latvia and then join Michael in England. Unfortunately, these plans were not meant to be fulfilled. On September 6th, Agnes went to the Costa del Sol nightclub with her friends. She had told her fiancé about her plans earlier, and he didn't object. At the club, they took pictures and had a good time, with Agnes posting some photos online that night. People who saw her that night remember Agnes wearing a short dress and carrying a small white handbag. As the night ended, Agnes told her friends she wanted to stay a bit longer and would take a taxi home. Her friends weren't worried because Agnes was responsible and hadn't had much to drink. As her friends left, Agnes was talking to a man who had bought her a cocktail. He seemed to be trying to win her over. After that, Agnes disappeared. Despite being in a crowded nightclub, no one saw her leave or knows where she went. The day after Agnes went missing, she failed to show up at work and her phone was turned off. Concerned colleagues and friends alerted the authorities, but the police were slow to act on their missing persons report. As the evening drew in, Michael, Agnes's worried fiancé, contacted her mother, explaining that he had been unable to reach Agnes all day, which was unprecedented. The following day, Agnes's parents and fiancé attempted to file a missing persons report with the Spanish police. However, they were informed that the report would only be considered if it was made in person. Consequently, Agnes's family and Michael flew to Marbella and filed the report 5 days after her disappearance. The investigation began with a search of Agnes's rented apartment. The property appeared as if Agnes had simply stepped out for a short time, with her belongings, including documents, money, and valuable jewelry, still intact. The fridge was stocked with prepared food, and several outfits were laid out on the bed, suggesting that Agnes had chosen what to wear to the club on her last night out. It was clear that Agnes had not returned to her apartment since leaving with her friends. Agnes's phone was switched off, and she stopped posting on social media. She also wasn't responding to any messages. At this point, the police started investigating her disappearance, but a significant amount of time had already passed. Her friends and family created flyers with her picture and distributed them across the city, asking for help in finding her. The media soon picked up the story, and Agnes's disappearance was featured on TV news and the front pages of local newspapers. The investigation advanced after police analyzed CCTV footage from inside and outside the entertainment venue. Although the files had been deleted, specialists were able to recover them. A parking lot exit camera recording showed Agnes being led out of the club around 6 a.m. by a man, apparently against her will. A closer examination of this footage, the last to show Agnes alive, revealed more disturbing details. A man of large build was leading Agnes, gripping her tightly around the waist. Agnes appeared frightened, attempting to break free several times and speaking emotionally. Despite her struggles, the man persisted, eventually forcing her into a Mercedes A63 with tinted windows in the parking lot. At the moment the large man pushed Agnes into the cabin, another man was already inside, while the first man went to the driver's seat. Agnes managed to open the door and tried to escape, but the doorman, standing next to her, intervened. The driver gestured and spoke, and the doorman pushed Agnes back into the car. The driver then handed the doorman something, likely a cash reward. About 6 minutes after Agnes entered the car, her phone was turned off and never turned back on. The vehicle's movement couldn't be tracked due to a lack of CCTV cameras. It became clear that the men in the cabin were the last to contact Agnes. The case was shrouded in secrecy from the start, with investigators signing non-disclosure agreements and information withheld from the press and Agnes's loved ones. 6 months after the incident, Agnes's relatives were shown footage from the club's cameras, which revealed the identities of the 3 men who had last been in contact with Agnes. The large man who forcibly removed her from the club and pushed her into a car was identified as Wesley Capper, the son of a wealthy and influential British millionaire. Also in the car were Craig Porter, a longtime friend of Capper's with no fixed occupation and a history of police attention, and Sean Usman, a dark-skinned doorman. During interrogation, Porter and Usman both claimed they were innocent, stating that Agnes had entered the car voluntarily. Capper's account was that he and a friend had spotted Agnes, a beautiful blonde, at the club and approached her to strike up a conversation. According to Capper, Agnes was already intoxicated, which contradicts the testimony of her friends. However, when offered a drink, she did not refuse. Capper then suggested continuing the party at his luxurious country house, and Agnes allegedly agreed. Agnes reportedly changed her mind about attending a private party at Wesley's house while already in the car. She asked to be dropped off on a dark stretch of road, saying she would take a taxi home. According to the driver, he dropped her off at the requested location, which had no streetlights or CCTV cameras. However, Craig Porter, another passenger, couldn't confirm or deny this account because he was also heavily intoxicated and didn't recall when Agnes was in the car. Craig claimed he fell asleep shortly after leaving the parking lot and didn't notice Agnes's departure. Sean Usman, the doorman, stated that Agnes was drunk but couldn't say if she entered the car voluntarily. He did confirm that when the car stopped, the blonde woman opened the door and almost fell out. Then, at the driver's request, the doorman slammed the car door shut, burning a substantial tip. When questioned, Usman said he didn't believe Agnes was trying to escape by jumping out of the car while it was moving. He thought she might have accidentally opened the door due to intoxication. He also mentioned that Agnes didn't scream or ask for help. However, footage showed Wesley Capper firmly holding Agnes by the waist and wrist, leading her to the car. Wesley claimed Agnes was dizzy, and he was supporting her to prevent her from falling. Later, investigators discovered another suspicious video taken at Soto Grande in southern Spain's Puerta de la Duquesa port. The video, dated September 10th, 4 days after Agnes's disappearance, showed Wesley, Craig, and 2 other men boarding John Capper's luxury yacht. They were carrying a large, heavy-looking suitcase and a rolled-up carpet. When the company returned to Puerta de la Duquesa port a few days later, they had no luggage. After watching the footage, Capper claimed that he and his friends sailed to Ibiza for fun. According to him, the suitcase contained their belongings, and what investigators thought was a carpet was actually bedding. However, he couldn't explain what happened to it afterward. A thorough search of Wesley's yacht and car yielded nothing, as both had been thoroughly cleaned and dry cleaned, eliminating any DNA evidence. Although a long blonde hair was found in a car's trunk, its origin couldn't be determined because the crucial evidence mysteriously disappeared during the investigation. At the trial, the prosecution revealed another peculiar detail. A few hours after Agnes was in the defendant's car, Capper made multiple calls to emergency services but hung up each time without waiting for an answer, as if he was afraid or unsure of his actions. Capper explained that he was drunk and made the calls randomly. The Clavin family's lawyer believed Agnes had been dead for some time, with her body likely on the seabed in the suitcase brought onto the yacht by the suspects. He also thought the case was intentionally delayed, allowing the suspects to eliminate any incriminating evidence. A year and a half after Agnes vanished, Capper, Porter, and Usman were in court, accused of holding her against her will and forcing her into a car. However, due to insufficient evidence, no additional charges could be brought. They were granted bail and discreetly left the courtroom. Agnes's family was understandably outraged, but the judge stood firm. It wasn't until 2019, nearly 5 years after Agnes's disappearance, that the 3 men were retried. They maintained their innocence, claiming Agnes had entered the car voluntarily. The prosecutor requested that the doorman, Usman, be considered an accomplice to the crime because he assisted the defendants in driving the victim, Agnes, away from the scene. This charge carried a potential 5-year prison sentence for Usman. In his defense, Usman delivered a passionate speech, claiming he was being targeted due to his skin color and inability to afford a good lawyer, as he sent all his earnings to support his impoverished family in Africa. In contrast, the lawyers for Capper and Porter argued that their clients were only guilty of convincing Agnes to get into the car, not of forcing her to do so. According to their version of events, Agnes was dropped off on the road at her request and was waiting for a cab to go home. They suggested that, while intoxicated and unable to defend herself, Agnes might have been kidnapped and killed by someone else. The judge's verdict shocked and outraged the family of the missing young woman because none of the defendants received significant punishment. Usman was acquitted of all charges, while Kappa received a 2-year sentence for taking advantage of Agnieszka's intoxication to persuade her to get into his car. Porter was sentenced to 6 months for his role in the incident. However, both men received suspended sentences and did not serve any time in prison. Instead, they paid Agnieszka's family a compensation of 101,000 sterling, which was seen as a paltry sum. Agnieszka's family was disappointed with the outcome and appealed the decision. It was later revealed that both defendants had broken the law again while awaiting the court's decision. Kappa, who was under the influence of alcohol and drugs, hit and killed a woman with his car and fled the scene. Porter and his friend, also intoxicated, stole a car after assaulting its owner. Despite the severity of these new crimes, Kappa was only sentenced to probation thanks to his lawyer's effective defense. He paid a substantial amount in compensation to the family of the woman he killed but remained free. Porter was less fortunate this time and did go to jail. In 2021, nearly 7 years after Agnieszka's disappearance, the main suspect faced punishment. Wesley had spent years living a self-destructive lifestyle, excessively consuming alcohol and illicit substances, which severely impacted his health. He was hospitalized and, after seeming to recover, suddenly suffered a stroke. Kappa passed away on July 26, 2021, at the age of 44. Around this time, Agnieszka's parents submitted another appeal to the court. However, since the suspect was now deceased, prosecution was no longer possible. Despite the Supreme Court's pending decision in this complex case, an unexpected development occurred 9 years later. Although Agnieszka's body was never found, she was presumed dead. Later, her family, including her parents, sister, and fiancé, accepted their lawyer's theory that the perpetrators had disposed of Agnieszka's body in a suitcase, which was then loaded onto a yacht and discarded at sea, making it impossible to recover. Nevertheless, in the summer of 2023, 9 years after Agnieszka vanished, the case took a surprising turn. In mid-June, a gardener at the elite Lida Golf Club in Costa del Sol discovered a mysterious object while cleaning near the coast. Upon closer inspection, it was an old, damaged suitcase. The gardener did not open it and instead called the police. Authorities found human remains inside the suitcase, later identified as belonging to a young woman aged 25 to 35 at the time of death. Further investigation revealed that the suitcase had been in the water for around 10 years before washing the shore. Based on this information, police suspected that the remains might belong to Agnieszka, who went missing 9 years ago. To confirm this, experts are currently conducting DNA tests to compare Agnieszka's DNA with the remains found. The investigation is ongoing, and details have not been made public. If the suspicions are confirmed, the case will be reopened, and surviving suspects will face trial. Hello friends. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Roxana Valdez. Roxana Valdez was born in 1957 in a small village in the province of Punta Arenas, Chile. Roxana married a man whose name is not publicly known, and they had a son together. However, the marriage was not successful, and they separated in 2011. As a single mother, Roxana faced significant challenges in her small village, where job opportunities were limited. The community's main occupation was farming and selling produce, and the local schools focused on teaching agricultural skills. Roxana worked at the Don Gregorio boarding school, which trained students to become agricultural technicians. Her role was a night supervisor, responsible for ensuring the students' behavior and slept at night. She did not have a direct role in raising the children. Roxana's son attended the same boarding school, as she was unable to care for him during the day due to her work in the fields. At the boarding school where Roxana worked, Claudio Muñoz Ramirez was the head of grounds maintenance. His nighttime work schedule led to him meeting Roxana. Despite their 14-year age difference, they discovered they had a lot to talk about. Roxana would often spend entire nights discussing school issues and her failed marriage with Claudio. They also shared commonalities in their personal lives. Claudio had 2 daughters he loved, but he felt disconnected from their mother and had considered divorce multiple times. However, he stayed in the marriage because of a promise he made to her late father. Over time, Claudio seemed to forget his promise and began spending more time with Roxana, away from his family. Eventually, he made a decisive move without explaining himself to his wife. He packed his belongings and left their home to be with Roxana, who happily welcomed him into her life. Their relationship moved forward quickly, but Roxana overlooked some important red flags. She welcomed a man she barely knew into her home, despite having children who needed her attention. As they had enjoyable conversations, Roxana failed to notice that Claudio had a temper and could be cruel. The first major incident occurred at the boarding school, where Claudio was in charge of cleanliness. During a scheduled cleanup day, some students refused to participate, which infuriated Claudio. He threatened to beat anyone who didn't help, despite having no teaching experience. Although it's unclear if he would have followed through on this threat, the students eventually started cleaning. Later, they collectively complained to the principal about Claudio's threats of physical violence. The principal, unhappy with Claudio, asked him to resign voluntarily. This was a significant setback, as the Don Gregorio boarding school was one of the few places in the area that offered stable and decent-paying jobs. After searching for work in fields and at fruit bases, Claudio realized it was a futile effort. He and Roxana decided to look for a better life elsewhere, but they left their son at the boarding school so he could continue his education. They didn't want to take any risks by bringing him along. To avoid relying on employers, who had already let them down, Claudio and Roxana decided to start their own small business, a fruit kiosk. They moved to Molina, a commune a couple of hours from the Chilean capital, known for its vineyards and wine exports. Roxana and Claudio bought a kiosk near their new home, found suppliers for vegetables and fruits, and started their small family business. Claudio took care of purchasing and transporting products, while Roxana handled sales throughout the day. They couldn't afford to hire an employee, as it would add to their expenses, and they worried that someone else might not take care of the perishable goods properly. Claudio became visibly upset and angry when he discovered Roxana was pregnant with their first child. This was a moment that required serious thought, but Roxana, caught up in their new relationship and thriving business, agreed with Claudio's suggestion to give the baby to her relatives to raise after birth. However, Roxana suffered a miscarriage afterwards. Following this, Claudio's behavior changed significantly. He frequently yelled at Roxana and occasionally turned violent. Neighbors, tired of the constant noise, often called the Chilean police, the carabineros, to intervene in their domestic disputes. One time, when the carabineros responded to a call, they found Roxana in tears and partially undressed, fleeing the house with Claudio chasing after her. Roxana revealed to the officers that she was suffering from ongoing domestic abuse, which had caused her miscarriage. The incident left her needing psychological support. However, as time went by, they seemed to put their issues behind them and continued living together as if nothing had happened. After the incident, Claudio should have faced charges, but Roxana chose to forgive him and give him another chance. She made him promise that it wouldn't happen again. Although Claudio promised to change, his past behavior with his ex-wife suggested that his words might not be reliable. Sadly, the past repeated itself. Claudio stopped physically abusing Roxana, but he started going out to local bars at night, drinking heavily and spending a lot of their family's money on alcohol and encounters with women. Roxana put up with her husband's behavior, hoping that he would settle down once they had a child. In a way, she was correct. After Roxana gave birth to a healthy child in 2013, Claudio changed his ways. He stopped going out and focused on their business, which was growing and needed more attention. They expanded their business by buying another kiosk and vehicle for transporting products. Roxana also invested in firearms for protection, as they lived and worked in areas that weren't very safe. The family's assets appeared to increase substantially, but this growth was only theoretical. In reality, Claudio resumed his previous habits, wasting money on alcohol and reverting to violent behavior towards Roxana. Roxana's account detailed how the abuse in their relationship escalated. At first, Claudio drank sporadically, but the frequency soon increased. When inebriated, he would return home, accuse Roxana of fictional affairs, and subject her to physical and sexual abuse. His actions seemed intentionally hurtful, even when Roxana was pregnant. This culminated in a miscarriage in August 2012, sending Roxana into a prolonged depression. On one occasion, following his typical routine, Claudio went to a local bar and didn't come back until the next morning. Roxana, accustomed to his behavior, still felt anxious about him. It was later discovered that Claudio had taken 5 million Chilean pesos, equivalent to around $6,000, which Roxana had obtained from selling her mother's house. He spent this money on alcohol and visits to brothels. Roxana was shocked and felt betrayed when she discovered that Claudio had taken the money meant for their shared business, which was hidden in their daughter's room. When Claudio came home late that evening, Roxana confronted him about the missing money. However, Claudio was uninterested in discussing the issue and instead hit Roxana, admitting that he had squandered all the money. This incident was the final straw for Roxana. Without saying a word, she went to their bedroom, retrieved a revolver that was meant for protection against local criminals, and shot Claudio in the chest. Claudio died instantly. Roxana was surprised by her own drastic action and attempted to stop the bleeding from the gunshot wound, but it was too late. The close-range shot from the .38 caliber revolver was fatal. In her testimony, Roxana expressed deep remorse and acknowledged the immorality of her actions. She confessed that when she retrieved the revolver, her intention was not to intimidate Claudio but to kill him. Roxana remembered the numerous times Claudio abused and assaulted her, and how she failed to report him to the authorities due to fear. She was afraid of being alone, especially after they had a child together. After shooting Claudio, Roxana's main concern was how it would affect their daughter if she were imprisoned and the child was sent to an institution. That night, Roxana decided to get rid of the body and report Claudio missing. She knew the police were aware of his frequent disappearances during drinking binges. As a delicate woman, disposing of the body was a daunting task. She decided to remove it piece by piece, using kitchen knives to cut the limbs and head. The process required 5 knives, as they kept becoming dull. Roxana then boiled the dismembered parts in large pots, all while playing with her young daughter, who was unaware of what her mother was doing and what had happened to her father. Roxana's calculated approach to disposing of the body, while trying to maintain a sense of normalcy for her daughter, shows the complexity and desperation of her situation. The day after cooking and cooling the body parts, Roxana packed them into separate plastic containers labeled by body part, hands, legs, head, and torso, and then placed each container into a garbage bag. She loaded the bags into her car and drove to St. Lucia to scatter them on a vacant lot. Before leaving, she cleaned her house thoroughly with bleach. However, upon arriving in St. Lucia, Roxana couldn't bring herself to dispose of the bags, despite finding a suitable location. Roxana was nervous during the drive, constantly feeling like she was being watched and fearing that the police would stop and search her car. This fear escalated into panic, prompting her to devise a backup plan involving her daughter, where she would pretend to rush her to the hospital if stopped by police. She even considered pinching her daughter to make her cry louder and make the situation more believable. Since Roxana couldn't discard the remains, she returned home and hid the bags in the garage. She then cleaned the interior of her car with bleach again and visited Claudio's relatives. She told the police that Claudio had stolen a large sum of money and hadn't been home for days, but they simply shrugged off her claims. Roxana visited her mother and brother, who were alarmed by her condition. She wasn't eating, had a glazed expression, and kept asking the same questions. The only question she answered clearly was about Claudio's absence, claiming he was delayed due to a flat tire while buying goods for their store. Overwhelmed by her thoughts and the hidden evidence, Roxana broke down and asked her brother for help. When he arrived, she revealed everything and showed him the containers. Her brother was shocked. Roxana wanted to unburden herself and share the traumatic experiences she had with Claudio, but she primarily needed her brother's help to dispose of the containers holding the body. However, her brother refused, fearing he would be implicated as an accomplice and face police involvement. He urged Roxana to confess to the Chilean police, the Carabineros, and threatened to do it himself if she didn't. Disappointed but with no alternative, Roxana decided to cooperate. That night, she went to the 4th police station to make a significant statement. The officers, who knew her, initially assumed she was there to report her problematic husband. However, they were stunned by what she revealed. Roxana was arrested on the spot. News of her arrest spread quickly, drawing numerous journalists to the station. As the journalists waited, Roxana was eventually brought out, visibly distressed and in handcuffs. Before being escorted into a police car, she exclaimed, "I was afraid he would kill me one day." At first glance, the case seemed straightforward. Roxana had confessed, provided evidence, and surrendered voluntarily. Nevertheless, prosecutor Monica Bisos was skeptical of Roxana's easy confession and wanted a more thorough investigation. Prosecutor Bisos asked to extend Roxana's arrest to allow for further forensic examination. The goal was to determine if Claudio was still alive when his body was dismembered, which would have led to a longer sentence for Roxana. The judge agreed to a 60-day detention to continue the investigation. At the same time, Roxana's lawyer, Carolina Gutierrez, argued that Roxana committed the crime under extreme emotional distress. This could have been made worse by postpartum depression and the domestic abuse she suffered. Gutierrez highlighted Roxana's cooperation with the authorities and her voluntary confession as reasons for a more lenient sentence. However, forensic results later showed that Claudio died from a gunshot wound to the chest, disproving the prosecution's theory that he was alive during dismemberment. As a result, the factors that would have increased Roxana's sentence were dismissed. Another lawyer, Juan Pablo Cardenas, pointed out that the gun used in the murder was registered. He also noted that Roxana first reported domestic violence to the police just 20 days after they moved in together. Psychologist Rodrigo Valenzuela conducted a medical examination and presented documents to the court showing that Roxana was severely mentally unstable when the crime occurred. This instability, linked to the loss of 2 children, meant she wasn't fully aware of her actions. Additionally, forensic results revealed that Claudio had a high blood alcohol level at the time of his death on April 17, 2015. Roxana's trial began after a year of investigations and evidence gathering. During the trial, Roxana refused to make statements due to her distress over the media portrayal. Prosecutors emphasized the severity of the crime, but couldn't prove premeditation. The defense argued that Roxana acted in self-defense against a man who had brutally mistreated her for years. The court hearing in Chile lasted several weeks, captivating the entire nation. Prosecutor Monica sought a 15-year prison term for Roxana, the accused. After considering the defense and the jury's input, the judges sentenced Roxana to 6 years in a correctional facility with a relatively lenient regime. Claudio's family, who had hoped for a life sentence or even the death penalty for Roxana, were outraged by the court's decision. They had already been upset when the prosecutor requested a 15-year sentence, which they felt was too lenient. The family attempted to downplay any history of domestic violence and claimed that Claudio, a financially independent businessman, would not have stolen $6,000 from Roxana. Additionally, they alleged that Claudio had confided in them about Roxana's threatening behavior, stating that she would often retrieve a revolver from the closet and threaten to kill him. In a press interview, Claudio's sister shifted the blame to the Chilean state, arguing that the country's judicial system is corrupt and fails to deliver justice, as evidenced by the relatively short sentence given to Roxana, which she compared to punishments for minor thefts. Giselle, Claudio's first wife, spoke out in his defense. She stated that Claudio was never violent during their many years together. In contrast, Roxana frequently started arguments due to her jealousy and possessiveness. Roxana was initially imprisoned, but after serving 2/3 of her sentence, she was transferred to a semi-open education center in Tala for good behavior. She was allowed to stay in contact with her daughter and was eventually released early. The media reignited public interest in the case, and many people were outraged by her early release. However, some individuals, despite viewing Roxana as a murderer, believed her actions were justified because they saw her as a victim. The debate surrounding this case continues to this day. This story emphasizes the severe consequences that can occur when domestic violence is not addressed promptly.